Dollar, dollar bill, y'all. My billfold's immeasurable in men's sixth sense. My presence like incense, it makes the room pleasurable. My credentials held on the highest pedestal. Pedal to the metal, hold the metal coast and settle any problems that are questionable. The ability for paper is impeccable, solidity exceptional. Long red agility for cheddar is incredible. Fuck with me up in Cipriani's basement with a zip or something flagrant.
How do you do? My name is Alfred Hitchcock, and I would like to tell you about my forthcoming lecture. It is about the birds and their age-long relationship with man. It will be seen in theaters like this across the country. In my lecture, I hope to make you all aware of our good friends, the birds. Theirs is a noble history, and through it all, man...
Hey, I don't know what happened. There was supposed to be a video that's playing, and this is. Oh wait, hold on. I realized what happened. I have the banner on. All right, wait, hold on. I'm gonna start that video over again. I left the banner on. It's the same as our background, so I completely forgot that like the banner was up and it wasn't our background. And I was like, why the fuck is the movie not or the trailer not playing? All right, sorry about that.
How do you do? My name is Alfred Hitchcock, and I would like to tell you about my forthcoming lecture. It is about the birds and their age-long relationship with man. It will be seen in theaters like this across the country. In my lecture, I hope to make you all aware of our good friends, the birds. Theirs is a noble history, and through it all, man has played a conspicuous part. This cave drawing is one of man's earliest sketches of his feathered friend. One can see at once the loving care with which the artist depicted his subject. The story of man and his friends, the birds, is filled with many fine examples of ways in which these noble creatures have added to the beauty of the world. Take this plumed hat from the period of Charles I. How proud the birds must have been to have their feathers plucked out to brighten man's drab life. Here we have a later model, a refinement of the first. Here man, or rather woman, thought enough of the birds to have an entire one as a decoration. It's quite dead, of course. Naturally, the egg plays a very prominent part in my lecture. Not a word about which came first, however. I don't believe in dealing with controversial matters. Thousands of years ago, man was satisfied merely to steal an egg from a nest and use it for food. Now he has perfected this process by imprisoning each hen in a separate cage and by scientifically manipulating the lights so that she doesn't fall into the rut of the old 24-hour day. Thus, he can induce the bird to reach fantastic heights of egg production. Originally, there were many varieties of birds on Earth. Some have become extinct. The great auk, the passenger pigeon, and the famous dodo bird have all disappeared. Actually, they didn't exactly disappear. They were simply killed off. But of course, this is nature's way. Man merely hurries the process along whenever he can be of help. Man and birds have been responsible for a great many advances in our civilization. For example, the bird was the inspiration for the invention of gunpowder, and it was his speed that brought about the development of the shotgun. But man has not been unmindful of his debt to the bird. We have honored our feathered friends in many ways. We cage birds and show them off proudly in most of our zoos. And the turkey is traditionally our guest of honor at Thanksgiving. I suspect you never realized that if it weren't for birds, even some of our pastimes would suffer noticeably. Duck hunting, for example. Granted, bagging a fellow hunter can be diverting, but the supply is rather limited. I hope you don't mind if I have something to eat, but I'm rushed today. Planning the lecture has been most educational for me. I've begun to feel very close to the birds and have developed a real sympathy for our little... What was I saying? Oh, yes, I've come to feel very close to the birds and have come to realize how they feel when... I don't think I'll eat just now. Hardly proper with all of you here. Surely the birds appreciate all we've done for them. Don't you? Beautiful cage, fresh water, no other birds to bother you, none of that blinding sunlight. Oh, now why would he do that? Most peculiar. What on earth?
They're coming! They're coming!
Okay, you're watching Movie Night Extravaganza. It is episode 11, and we're going to be talking about Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds. I'm joined, as always, or as usually, because we have a rotating, I guess, co-hosting situation right now, by John Ross.
What's up?
And a nice panel, Charlie, aka RC Roberts. You're gonna have to say the name of your Substack because I really.
The name of my Substack is Ferocia Anime. It's
Okay.
Latin. No.
All right. I'm also joined by Gianni Ingenio, one of my close friends, film producer, director, writer, part of some big projects that he's not allowed to plug right now, I don't think.
Well, I can plug one. I am an associate producer and story producer for the reality survival TV show Alone, which I think is having its third to last episode on tonight. So, catch up and then finish it next week. But it's a good show, and I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, for sure. I don't know. Gianni and I went to high school and college together, and we're both in the film program, and we would like go out for drinks and talk about movies like at least like once a month. I think like I still remember getting really engrossed in a discussion at Oasis about like random movies and like just not noticing that like people were starting to dance behind us because it was like an empty bar when we had gotten there. So they were like,
yeah.
The music was starting, and I was like, oh, all right.
No, we definitely had a few nights where like we definitely would show up a few deep and then like start talking about like some movies and stuff, and then you show up early so you get in for the discount or for the whatever special's going on, and then like you check your watch and it's like, oh, it's midnight already. Oh, there's like 100 people here. All right, well, I guess we'll just go do something else. Yeah, good times.
All right. Also joined by Izzy, who he has a TikTok, a horror TikTok, which I didn't know even was like a subgenre of TikTok, but like makes sense now that I know that.
Horror talk, baby.
And I'm also joined by Karthik, who I don't know why he wasn't in the on screen, but he's been joining Left Flank Vets for Revolutionary Tracks, which is a music like podcast episode. That how often do you do it? Like weekly or
bi-weekly?
All right, bi-weekly music episode or music themed interview episode with Left Flank Vets, which is pretty amazing. I mean, we had Lorax from Left Flank Vets on to do the Past of Glory episode, and I feel like that's like that was one of the best episodes I think we've done, and it was because he like knew so much about they have such like opinions about war and and the life as a vet and all this different stuff. So having him on, I think, really helped our situation there. So let's dive into
Forrest,
the.
just real quickly, I forgot to plug the podcast or my show. It's TGRS, the John Ross Show. It's on Twitch. Moving to a nighttime schedule because I'll be starting school pretty soon. So
I'm gonna give everyone a chance to plug stuff at the end. I just I really wanted to get into talking about that the birds, but also that trailer is pretty fucking incredible, I think.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Hitchcock always had like incredible trailers to his movies. There's somebody that like doesn't like trailers. Like he was really quick to like, here's my movie. Here's the point. Here's this. And that's it. Like goodbye. Like it's just like super simple, no shots spoiled, like very, very to the point and dry, which is great because it's the exact opposite of like what his movies usually are.
Yeah. And I think that I think not spoiling a shot is obviously important because, as the master of suspense, like the shots that are the most incredible in Hitchcock movies are the ones that are going to spoil the suspense, I think.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So he ends up scripting a movie, like he ends up having to script a movie trailer that doesn't spoil the suspense for anybody. And then it becomes its own, like its own almost play. You know what I mean? And I feel like Hitchcock his movies are like plays in a lot of ways, like the way he crafts them, I think. You kind of, and the way he markets them, you feel a lot more like you're watching a more intimate like play than you are a movie, I'd say. Well, not a movie, a film.
Even the exchange that they have at the kind of car where I think she's driving away from the island for the first time, or like she's driving away from the Bodega Bay for the first time, and they have this quick kind of exchange, which is almost bordering on absurd. Like it's supposed to be their like kind of first flirtatious, kind of romantic over the first obvious exchange, right? And then
their first over the pants exchange.
Right, yeah. and it quickly devolves into this kind of almost fight or like quibble, and then it's kind of like affectionate but also kind of mean in a way. And I feel like that exchange is perfectly and it encapsulates like the eeriness of the whole movie. Like there's something weird going on the whole time and you can't put a finger on it. And that's kind of the
I think that following right after doing Psycho, I think where the whole movie you feel unsettled. Sorry that I'm spoiling it for the people that this is their first Hitchcock movie, I guess. But the whole movie, you feel unsettled by Norman Bates. You feel unsettled by the whole situation. But you can't. I mean, like you think that the mother is obviously the one running around killing people. You're unsettled. Like there's the final reveal where you realize it's Norman, like dressed as the mother, running around killing people. Having a character at the center of a story like that, who the entire movie is based around making you feel unsettled, not knowing why, and having it be a character. Hitchcock, I think, is clearly his. You feel unsettled by every character in this, and then it turns out that every character is kind of just like a person. Like there's no, like he builds up these relationships, I think, between these characters where you feel like, all right, like something weird's going on here. And kind of, I think the big suspense, I mean, one of the big reveals in like at like the 50-minute mark is that like, no, like it's just birds attacking. Like there's no deeper characterization where it's like somebody calls the birds or like, the birds are really attacking because someone's evil or like someone's causing this. Like the birds are just attacking. You don't know why, like, and go. So it feels like the movie kind of starts at that point.
Well, I think that this is like a unique Hitchcock film because it's one of the few times where the antagonist or like the source of conflict for our characters is not another person. Like it's very rare that Hitchcock films deal with outside of like personal relationships or personal circumstance. Which to me adds a level of deepness to his film. I'm actually really not a big Hitchcock fan. Between this Rear Window, like, and even Psycho, I don't even put up there, but I don't find his films super, I don't, when I sit down and want to like enjoy a movie, I really don't put on a Hitchcock film just because of like how cheesy some of the stuff can be. But this film,
You
for me,
don't just throw on North by Northwest or something like that and just go. I'm gonna chill. It's time for some Hitchcock.
Well, it's interesting because you say North by Northwest, but that's like the perfect example of what I'm talking about. There's that like iconic scene where like he's about to meet the guy that's like gonna tell him like, okay, like, oh, let me help you out, like I'll get you out of whatever. I'm trying to remember the plot point. And he's like, oh, I can clear up, and then like somebody throws like a knife at his back, and then like the guy dives, and then he is trying to reach and grab the knife out, but it looks like he stabbed him in the back, and the whole crowd turns around. They're like, it's like that stuff. I'm really like, oh, okay, whatever. But like the Birds really takes that like person versus person element out and really makes it like people versus nature, which I think is much more terrifying, or much more suspenseful in a way too, because you never know what's going to happen next. Animals are so unpredictable.
It's funny because the last episode that we did on Tuesday was Planet of the Apes, which kind of has a very similar theme, which is like, humans have fucked up the planet and the planet is retaliating. Like we constantly disrespect nature, and now obviously Planet of the Apes, nature has overtaken us, but in this sense, it's just one town. Like it's the ISIS strategy. They're taking it one town at a time, I guess. So it is very interesting. And my thought today was I was watching it for like the third time because I watched it twice before this, and I've watched it like probably like 15 or 20 times since I was a kid. Like Hitchcock was like one of the first horror directors I feel like as a kid that I could get into, because like I would put on something like a slasher film or something, and my parents would be like, whoa, you can't watch that. But as like a little kid, I could put on like a Hitchcock movie, and they'd be like, well, this is art. You know what I mean? So, this is filmmaking as it should be. So,
filmmaking 101.
So I have like a ridiculously large collection of Hitchcock VHSs, and I still have a VHS player, but apparently the one that I can't find is The Birds. I have like, I don't know, like I tweeted that earlier, like the collection of it. It's just like a stack, and it's like pretty much every other, like I think I have 4 copies of 39 Steps on VHS. And I don't know, it's weird, but yeah. So I think that it is rare. It's incredible. Like it's really an exclusive Hitchcock movie in the sense that like the people don't turn out to be the villains, or a person doesn't turn out to be a villain. But today my thought was, when I was watching that, it was because I think Psycho literally had focused on that to a point where it's like, all right, like we get it, like the shy, quiet mama's boy guy is like a fucking killer, like, you know what I mean, like a serial killer, like, So I feel like Hitchcock moving away from that for this movie really does feel in context, because it's 3 years later. 3 years, like, in Kitty, in context, it really feels like he's really trying to do something the complete opposite of what you'd expect, which really is the point of suspense, I think. You know what I mean? Like, he wants to leave you in suspense, and like, what's the best way to leave you in suspense? Have 50 minutes of characters having this weird interpersonal drama where every single person looks potentially like they could be the person that's like somehow causing all of this to happen. Like, like the mother is obviously afraid to be abandoned and is kind of obsessive about killing her son's relationships. Both the son, and like his new Paris Hilton like girlfriend, socialite girlfriend, they've been lying to each other the entire time, and you start to wonder, like, is she some kind of con artist? Like, is her fortune real? Like, is she really on the, like, you know what I mean? The suspicion of it is like accentuated by the way that Hitchcock shoots it. So every character seems like they can come under suspicion, and then the big reveal is that, like, none of these characters are actually suspicious. They're just like weird people with like emotional and codependency issues, and but like in the end they come together, they rally, they get the fuck out of there, like, but like and the rest of it isn't explained at all.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
having never seen a Hitchcock movie before, I did think it was interesting that the first 50 minutes is basically just an interconnection of speculation. Everybody has an idea or a theory about everybody else. But it is interesting that he kind of interrupts that speculation for just kind of a freak of nature where birds are attacking people and flying through walls. I thought some of the acting was a little cheesy. There's only so many times you can stand there scared with the daughter and run from one wall to another before it's like, you should probably pick somewhere else to go.
And then you find out it's only their town. No other towns are affected. They had just left Bodega Bay.
Right. Well, what I also found the most, I had a little epiphany while I was watching it. And I realized if somebody had ever come to ask me before or after watching this movie, come and ask me, hey, what would you do if birds were attacking? I don't think anybody has an answer for that question. Like, what do you do? And, and like towards the end, that radio broadcasting thing was talking about how they're gonna have to send in the army or something. It's like, what,
the army against the birds.
So it's like we have so few solutions that we're gonna just send in the army. So
it's also kind of a it's kind of
what
a
are they
reverse,
gonna do?
It's a reverse War of the Worlds, right?
Yes,
where
right.
in the end, like the birds are the solution, and this but like when the birds turn on you, like humanity was saved, and the birds saved humanity. All right. So then the birds turn on you.
Right. Yeah.
What are they gonna do? What are they gonna do when the military shows up? Shoot the birds? I mean, they're just
right. Yeah. It's just a bunch of hunters. They let them loose.
It's okay though.
Usually in monster movies, you tend to have like the monster would end up being some sort of allegorical or like a metaphor for some kind of interrelationship that is portrayed on the among the characters. But in this case, like the monster is a complete externality, as you kind of pointed out, which is kind of like interesting because it makes you wonder what the birds even represent, because they it's an easy kind of like, and even in the trailer, like he makes the point that it's supposed to be kind of like a nature against man type of situation, but it also kind of like the questions such as why didn't they leave the bay, why didn't they just go to a different town, what about that kind of place, and this attack is like why is it so specific, kind of like makes us ask whether the birds are just like some kind of arbitrary environmental kind of uprising, or if it's trying to portray something a little more specific than that. Because like and again, like even on the point of it being very different from Psycho, I think I would also ask the question of like Psycho is supposed to be the unconscious kind of coming to the surface and having and fully manifesting itself. Here you could argue it's the same thing that's happening, except it's not happening in the form of a human, but like a total third party element, like kind of like Venom from Spider-Man 3. It's like this total external element, but it's totally kind of complementing everything about these people, because their lives are completely boring and like lazy, and nothing really significant is happening, that they have to make up these kind of games to play with each other.
Happening. A socialite who is the talk of the newspapers has shown up in their sleepy fishing bayside town, and you say
whose
nothing
daddy
happening.
is owning the newspaper. By
a lot is happening in this sleepy town.
Well,
I mean, like she almost goes into a fountain. She goes into a fountain and like jumps into a fountain naked and all that, right? Isn't that supposed to be the tabloid moment?
It was scandalous, and it made the gossip columns, and everyone was talking about it.
Which, by the way, that event is totally inspired from this movie right here, and I'm just gonna make sure that that's very clear. Jumping into Trevi Fountain in Rome. But to that point about why the birds are attacking this specific place, and right when she shows up, I mean, that woman in the diner even says like, they weren't attacking until you were here. Like, what did you do? I think the film is very clear. Well, let me start off with this. I like to look at things very retrospectively. Personally, I think Hitchcock read the short story and was like, birds being scary. I bet that could be a great movie. And then just elaborated on that.
He also lived near Santa Cruz, where they reference it, but in 1961, a bunch of birds, and I have the headline for I was going to pull it up later on, but a bunch of birds literally went crazy, started throwing up everywhere, dive bombing cars, dive bombing houses, dive bombing people, and nobody knew why. They didn't figure out why until like 2012. That like so we can talk about that later on. But yeah, no, I think it's those two things together.
Well, and I think a lot of some of the things that I caught onto the film, and so I watched it years ago, and I've watched it like 3 times this week, and I even have it on in the background right now as we're talking. I think that's something that is not as talked about as much in the film is the hints of like feminism, especially in the age of the second wave feminist movement in America being like 2 or 3 years before this film. There's a lot of elements that I think the birds represent kind of like the old way of how we saw the natural world versus the new way of women finding their own empowerment and feeling more individualized, which is also signified by Melanie always wearing green. So she is a figure of nature, just as the birds are. And these two, like we say that it's people versus nature, but it's almost nature versus nature in a way of like, this old idea that, women aren't supposed to jump in fountains. Women aren't supposed to do whatever they want and enjoy life and, drive all the way to this place to sleep with a guy and do it by delivering birds. Women are supposed to be like the mother figure and take care of kids and provide for their husband, even though wife in the when she's bedside talks about how she still wakes up and wants to like make her husband breakfast every day. And her fear is about being abandoned. And now that she's lost her husband and her one child is grown up, it's her other child's birthday. That idea of her job of being a woman is almost a completion. And she feels like when that's done, then there'll be nothing. Compared to Melanie, who's very like, I'm just going to do whatever the hell I want. So I think that the element of nature versus nature there of like, this is how things were done and you're challenging that versus, well, this is who I am and this is what I am going to do because I'm a free person, I think is an interesting dynamic that the film presents very well. Of course, looking at it
And
2021 line.
To that exact point, there also seems to be a old money, new money dynamic going on here, where it seems like they're kind of old money. Like it seems like their house is very nice. They're living in this, weirdly enough, very very Anglo-Saxon New England WASP town, although it happens to be in Northern California, which everybody has like Boston accents, which kind of weirded me out. I don't know if anyone else noticed that. Like, I was like, yeah, like like they have this like.
Yeah, the mid-Atlantic accents was,
but like a lot of times it wasn't. A lot of times people seem to have like Boston, like Maine accents. Right. They have like the slight like Maine, or not Boston, but like Cape Cod, like that kind of old, like, old money.
Mid-Atlantic. Yeah, the sort of the proper kind of like the lady that we run into.
The main characters seem to have that accent.
Well, yes, right.
People in the actual town seem to have like a slight, like almost Massachusetts tinge. Like at least the guy, like the store owner, like that. So they seem to have like this, like it's almost like this could be transported to like Cape Cod or something that this is happening in. You know what I mean? Like, or like Martha's Vineyard or something like that. Like there's a very old money atmosphere to it, a very waspy atmosphere to the town. And Melanie Daniels, her father owns the newspaper, but she seems to have a very nuevo rich, as they'd say, attitude towards life, and she's just kind of a socialite, like like in a way that really existed in the '60s that I don't know if really existed before that. Like she's just going, and they seem to even imply that she's just like she's just kind of just hooking up with guys and like Rome. She like stops herself from saying that when they're in front of the car. She's like, well, I was doing plenty of and then she like changed the subject, but like it's this new attitude where she's a very bohemian in some sense nuevo rich socialite. So there's like almost like both a generational and like I think a new money and old money dynamic going on. I don't know if anyone else caught that as a
what I kind of feel like is like interestingly this time I watched probably when I was like half my age right now, 14, 15. And like, I remember thinking that it was like some sort of, that the birds were kind of like the enemy. This time I kind of felt like a sort of solidarity with the birds. And I felt like they were kind of representing the feeling that I had at the 50-minute mark, because like, there was nothing really, like I said, like there was not really much going on, despite the fact that like all of this socialite venturing out into this a quest to give the rose to her or get the rose from her bachelor or whatever. And like at the end of it all, like you're kind of hoping for, okay, your lives are not really kind of representing the sort of while on the one hand possessing all of the qualities of feminist movements, like kind of showing the interrelationships, the complex kind of characters of the women involved. At the end of the day, I don't know if any of you guys caught the scene where the kid kind of calls, he's kind of like a public defender or something like that, and she says that he hangs out in the hood or something.
No,
and it just like
what the kid says is that the guy all right. So the kid says, I actually wrote down the quote. She says, the people he defends are hoods, meaning like they're criminals, like just by default. Like she doesn't, and she's like an 11-year-old, so like you got to take it with a grain of salt. But she's saying like, yeah.
But the point is that like the birds seem to be completely.
She says I know all that democracy jazz. They're still hoods.
Yeah, at the end of the day, the birds seem to be sort of like attacking them indiscriminately, regardless of their like so-called actualizations of womanhood in every possible way. Like so good for you that you're a socialite who was able to jump into a fountain in Rome. I'm still gonna peck you on the head because you still get that from the birds. And he said it also kind of like the whole expression of giving somebody the bird also comes to mind. Like I just couldn't stop thinking about the whole idea of the birds as a sort of fuck you to the class of people that it's attacking.
Well, it's like watching the birds as a lib versus watching the birds as a socialist. Like when you're a lib, you're like, oh no, I hope they're okay and their personal stories are good. And then as a leftist, you're like, no, indiscriminately attack everyone. Fuck the socialite. Fuck old money. We're out here. We're gonna burn it all down. But I wanted to bring Izzy into this because he hasn't said very much yet. I wanted to get his opinion on
Yeah, so Birds, I think it's a very wholesome movie. It's so weird. It feels like there's a lot of like character development, but it's like character development that they're like all sus as fuck.
Yeah.
Yeah, like it's funny. So and at the same time, at the end of the movie, I'm just like left like I don't know, like on edge, like almost like Sopranos, because like you don't know how the birds can be killed or what they're going to do to like take out this population of birds. Like usually during horror movies, evil entity, the person killing everybody, there's always like a weak spot. So we don't get that with the birds. Like we don't, like they're like we said earlier, they're calling in the army. It's like, okay, what does the army do against like hundreds and thousands of birds,
Well,
so like
the town. That town's done.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, it's just we don't know what's going to unfold. Like, will they ever be defeated, or is this it for everybody? Is it going to spread? We don't know.
No, that was the point I was about to make when you said like, is it contained in this one town? Like, are the birds suddenly going insane, or is it like going to be a global phenomenon where all of a sudden like you're just kind of you're just the whole world is taken over by birds? Like you don't know, but like also I mean. So that part of it didn't exactly make sense to me until I was reading today about the fact that it really did happen in Santa Cruz, which is what they reference in when they're in the diner. And it turns out in Santa Cruz it happened. There was like a couple days where birds were just bombing everything, and then all of a sudden it just stopped, and nobody could figure it out for 50 years. So, I mean, to Gianni's point, I think that he made earlier, where it's just like, he reads it, like Hitchcock reads a story and goes, that would make a good movie. Like, also, like in a town that was very near where Hitchcock was living at the time, like it literally happened, and Hitchcock's like, huh.
Can I get a oh yeah?
Oh no! What happens now?
The birds got him.
He was about to reveal what happened.
Forces summon the birds.
The FBI and the birds have worked together to take place.
The birds are all drones.
Have you ever seen a bird, like actually seen and held a bird? They're all drones. There's no such thing as a bird.
Oh man.
Uh,
Yeah. Well,
What ended up happening? Like, what is it? Is it that he got knocked off the stream?
Oh, he knocked out his webcam cord.
yeah, something. Well, we could continue without him. Although I feel like we'd start talking and then he'd just pop up in the middle of his sentence.
yeah.
It's like, hey guys, how's it going?
I'm sure he'll be back in a second.
Yeah.
And there it is. There he is.
Did the birds get you?
I was being too Italian and talking with my hands, and literally talking, and then I knocked my webcam cord out. So I had to figure out how to best fix that. I'm gonna try to get this webcam to work again, but
all good.
But yeah, no, I mean, I think this, I don't think you guys never needed me, There it is. All right. No, I was literally talking like this, and then I noticed that I had hit the USB thing, and I was like, fuck. I was really being an Andrew Cuomo there for a second.
Whoa. He's not Italian anymore. We're taking the O's out of his name. We're leaving the U.
When I was on Kenzo's show, he has a show that he does on Sundays called Meet the Left, where he kind of just gives you a bunch of like topics that you're going to talk about. And it was when Cuomo had first started, when the first, like some of the first Cuomo scandals came out. I think it was in February, and we lost Karthik too. But so it was in February, and he put the name as Quomtown, like Cumtown, but like with Quom.
Oh no, that's not good.
But then Jazzy, like I was talking to Jazzy, and she goes Quomtown, and I was like, actually, I think I've already seen that joke made on a. But yeah, sorry for knocking my webcam cord out. That was a unfortunate moment in history. Yeah. I guess it's going with the theme of the night, though. Like Cole's thing, like Cole's internet didn't work, and then I forgot to turn off the banner and whatever else. Yeah. So anyway,
that's the beauty of live broadcasting, though, right?
Yeah. So I'm gonna play a clip, I guess, to get us back on track.
Let's do it.
This is Hitchcock talking about the difference between a whodunit, a thriller, and a suspense movie in his imagination, because this woman that's interviewing him accidentally, I think, calls what he does a thriller or something, and this is his response to it. So I think it's interesting.
Speaking of sexiness, you deal a lot with sexual aberrations and fetishes as subject matter. You feel this is a good subject matter for suspense?
Well, suspense it doesn't relate really to that.
Then why would you
Suspense
use these?
Relates entirely to causing an audience to go through emotions, and can only be arrived at by giving them knowledge. Most people get confused between the mystery story and the thriller and the suspense story and the whodunit. See,
Well,
the
what is the
whodunit,
difference?
there's a big difference. The whodunit, you see, is a intellectual exercise like a crossword puzzle. When you buy a whodunit, you're terribly tempted to look at that last page, and you don't, because you feel you've wasted your money or be disappointed. But the suspense story is giving the audience full information before you start. In other words, there is a bomb under these seats. Tell the audience that, and they will scream out and say, "Get out of there, get out of there."
How about in Notorious? Could you describe the buildup of suspense there?
Well, no, that wasn't really. The suspense there was, how soon will Claude Rains find out that the woman who was the daughter of an old friend is an American agent? We all know it. We were told at the beginning that she was working with Cary Grant. Then you had the added fact that Cary Grant was in love with her. And yet, in the course of his job, had to put this woman into the arms of another man. So that was your emotional story, but your suspense story, which built up to its climax, when they just then, in the process of which you come to the moment when it says, "Mother, I'm married to an American agent." Now they know they've got to get rid of her, but they've got to get rid of her surreptitiously. Can't just bump her off because all the rest of his colleagues will know. So you get a case of arsenical poisoning, you see.
Who is your idea of an ideal villain? I've heard you read somewhere that you thought that Claude Rains kind of personified
Well, he was
the
a
ideal.
nice man in his way, you know. I think any man, as you know, as you've seen the film Frenzy, you've got a cheerful, lively man who is a psychotic. You see, unless they're pleasant and acceptable, their victims would never go near them. Most people misunderstand what a villain is. He's a charming man who kills women. But if he didn't have the charm, they'd run a mile from him.
Well, that brings us back maybe to sexual aberrations again. There seem to be a lot of Jack the Ripper types in various films.
Well, they are aberrations by the fact that outwardly they're acceptable members of society. And in the picture Frenzy, I agreed to go to some extent in a scene between a doctor and a lawyer to explain that fact, that outwardly they're normal, apparently decent human beings. And then, quote, it comes over them, unquote.
You do use humor. Do you think that plays a kind of relief from the building up of suspense?
You'll always need it.
You know, you can't
it's like
just
a bomb situation. If you have the bomb, you must never let it go off, because if you've created suspense with the audience, then you must relieve it.
Yeah, so
Wise words.
I kind of feel like he's talking about himself a little bit, where he's like, they're perfectly normal human beings, but, you know, it comes over them. Just
You
like...
know, I want to make like a serious point on how like you can see the influence on Taxi Driver from just that interview, but I also want to make a joke of just like, he sounds like the first like Joaquin Phoenix Joker.
Sometimes you think a woman's in love with you, but it's your own psychotic
imagination.
You just have to burn everything to the ground. It's the
We
70s.
live in a society of suspense.
The suspense in that case is the world going to be burned down. Now, probably. I don't know if it's going to be me that does it or the other 15 Jokers at the end of the film. How would I know that?
But to talk seriously on this point, I think that that was a good. I mean, obviously, he's a fantastic filmmaker and was incredibly knowledgeable. But I think even if you were to compare his films with the more suspenseful films of today, or even of recent, and recent I mean like past his prime, you know, like Taxi Driver or something, like all throughout Taxi Driver, we know Travis Bickle is one event away from becoming this like awful menace to society. And every time you watch it, you're like, which one's going to do it? Or which one's going to do it? Which one's going to do it? And that is suspense.
Yeah,
you know, that's like true suspense
and I
building
think
up.
In a very Hitchcockian sense, I guess, the ending of Taxi Driver. Sorry for all the spoilers. I know it's only been like 40 years, but you know, the end of Taxi Driver is that he doesn't get punished for his crimes, which you assume that even if it's like it. I don't know. I enjoy Taxi Driver for the reason that if one thing had been different, he would be like a criminal that was, you know, sentenced to the maximum amount that anybody possibly could. He killed a presidential candidate. He would have been like, you know, your Lee Harvey Oswald. He would have been something like that. You know what I mean? Like looked down on by society for so fucking long, sitting in jail for the rest of his life if not executed. But the fact that, you know, he decides at the last blur, he's kind of pushed away from that point, and he's like, oh, I guess I'll just kill a pimp so I can rescue this 12-year-old girl. 12-year-old Jodie Foster over there. Like at that point, all of a sudden he's hailed as a hero in the hospital, and he doesn't face any charges. And like the suspense really, it is thinking that he's going to be killing a politician. But once that doesn't happen, you're like, all right, where is this going from here? And it goes to the point where it's like, no, like as a vigilante, like we're gonna reward you. Like, you know what I mean? Like crime is rampant. It's like it's the 70s. Like, you know, like you're gonna get a reward for this. And it's like, holy shit, the difference between killing one person and killing like 6 people, but also, you know what I mean, like going on like a rampage, but also it's criminals that you're killing. Like the difference between those two things is like mind blowing.
I like the kind of comparison with the Joaquin Phoenix Joker, because I feel like the Joaquin Phoenix Joker killing the mom in the hospital is basically the killing the mom that happened in Psycho, essentially, or like the kind of death of the mother figure, or like the kind of maternal authority that is breaking before he goes like full anarchist. Which is kind of like the same kind of suspense that you're talking about with Taxi Driver as well, because it's kind of like, as much as it's a suspense, it's also a subversion, like kind of the attack or the kind of violent event that's happening is actually causing a kind of release of the tension, and also like a sort of liberating experience in a way. Each attack or murder in all of these cases, like not through the release of the tension, also signifies like the character achieving some sort of higher plane of like knowledge, or like some greater accomplishment is taking place within the scheme of the story. I feel like something if you draw that parallel to Birds, I feel like it's like I mean, I said this to you, Forrest, in the text. I feel like it's kind of more like the suspense is what's going to be the final straw for the class war to break out, or something like that. So when are the Birds going to go in for the kill to actually cause the rupture in the system? Because they kind of like slowly take one shot here and there. You know, one bird even fails at like getting into the door, hits the door and then dies.
Actually,
so it's kind of like
I have a point about that. Is it's kind of Hitchcock at the same time nodding to us, being like, "Don't worry, there's going to be birds." Like, you know, oh no, like, you know what I mean? Like, it interrupts a very deep, like very passive aggressive, but also open emotional conversation. Because at the end of the movie, you realize none of these relationships that he's built have mattered. Like, the thing that mattered is that birds have attacked the town. Like, the plot of the movie is that birds have attacked the town. You know, Hitchcock kind of fucking with his audience is waiting 50 minutes and building these really fucking boring relationships, so that the payoff is that birds start attacking people and none of them matter. Which, you know, Hitchcock's entire career has been spent building relationships just for one relationship or two relationships to turn out to be, you know, like to turn out to be the relationships that really matter, and to like move the plot and like kind of just be a twist. But in this case, he builds it's like he's building a Jenga tower, and then no one ever pulled, like, you know what I mean? Like the thing that pulls it out is that a bunch of birds fucking attack the Jenga tower. Like, there's, you know what I mean? Like,
and it's like 52 minutes. It's like you wait for the first bird attack. Like, the first bird attack happens when the socialite character Melanie gets you know, attacked just on the forehead.
Yeah.
Right. Well, all right. Well, I was gonna say the way I kind of saw it was it was almost like the birds, at least to me, it didn't seem like they symbolized anything. It seemed like they were there to take the symbolic sort of landscape that was developed in the first 50 minutes and just kind of turn it over. Yeah. Where you know, because I think that I don't know. It's almost to me, it's almost like the birds didn't have any symbolism at all. Like it's almost it's almost a nothingness that just is brought in to reveal that the symbols that we have, or the things that we read into things, are just things that we're making up. Because like the first 50 minutes, like I said before, was kind of just this continuous people being like, oh, I bet this is going on about this. And, and even in the diner scene, you have all these people with the different theories. The world's ending. No, it's just birds, whatever. But all of this sort of gets, it sort of doesn't matter. And sort of, I don't know. It's almost like the birds don't really symbolize anything. It's almost nihilistic. You in one interpretation anyway.
Well, and that's
yeah. Wait, Gianni. Sorry.
no, my bad. But I was just gonna say, like, I think the idea is it possible that the birds are just a MacGuffin? I mean, absolutely. It's Alfred Hitchcock. He is notorious for making MacGuffins.
You mean MacGuffin?
Yeah.
Making a MacGuffin out of this one too.
But I think to say that the birds don't signify everything, I think the film does hint at the fact that Melanie is there is significant, and not only that Melanie is there, but anytime, like the first time there's a bird attack, she has just breached the house of the person that she was there to visit. The second time birds attack, it's her like getting closer to the people of the town. The third time is at the birthday party, and it's even clear that that the school teacher even points out, it's like, okay, that's 3 times, so that means that it's not a coincidence. There's a significant targeted attack going on in the context of the film. I'm not talking about like in the real life situation of these characters. And then for the 4th time, and this is something that I picked up on my second viewing of the film, and one reason why I take such a strong stance towards like the second wave feminist kind of point of view is if you watch when they attack for the 4th time, it's that night after the birthday party. And again, like it happens there, and then it is suggested that same night they attack the guy that the mom was friends with, that like got the feed from the chickens. But when the cop comes to the house, him and Mitch are talking for a while about why the birds are attacking, and they can't, it doesn't make any sense. Like, what could be going on? What could be happening? Not this, not that, not this. The whole time the mother's picking up the broken pieces from the house, and trying to bring her life back together. As soon as they stop talking, she adjusts the painting of her dead husband.
Yeah,
and
I saw that. Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, the dead bird, it falls and scares her.
Yeah.
It attacks her in a way. And I think that adds more significance to the idea that essentially, like, these women are constantly misunderstood and being still in a way haunted by the misogyny that they were living through, these older women I'm speaking of. And the presence of Melanie threatens that once thought of natural way of doing things, which then upturns the way that society and what we thought was natural and what is natural is true. And it then subverts our expectation of what the birds actually are. So in a way, like we were talking earlier about the birds being like, finding some class solidarity with the birds, I kind of feel more like they're like the Memonists, like Chads and Chat, kind of like.
How can you say that about the birds? They're birds. No. I had the opposite take on my third watch through, which is kind of funny because that was earlier today, and then I was trying to rush to get clips together and stuff. But my take was that so my take on the entire thing is that Melanie is the MacGuffin showing up, because in my take on this, and I wrote these down. So there's like 3 tropes that end up coming back in pretty much every animal attack movie, and that have been in monster movies in the past. Like, so there's the 3 tropes of, like, the ornithological lady obviously represents like science. Like, science can't explain why the birds are attacking. And in real life, looking at that bird attack that happened in Santa Cruz, science can't explain why the birds are attacking for 50 years. You know what I mean? Like, so that makes sense. The second thing is religion, like the preacher that's drunk, that's the preacher that's drunk is just kind of like the end of the world. So the woman, all she can tell you, all she can tell you is that there are species of birds, how many birds there are, and what birds sometimes do, and like the thing about the brain paths. And science has failed at that point. All religion can do is tell you that the world is ending. Religion has failed at that point. Then kind of a fascist mentality kicks in, where the guy's like, all right, we'll just kill all the birds. Fuck birds. You know what I mean? And then the last thing that happens is that the general town's population responds to the fascism of it and just goes, it must be this woman that's causing it. So I thought her showing up kind of is the MacGuffin, because I thought Hitchcock was kind of making the point that when there is no explanation, which I think Hitchcock's point is that there is no explanation. I don't think the birds necessarily represent anything. I also think that Hitchcock wants you to transplant your own vision of what the birds represent, because it's terrifying. You're seeing something truly terrifying that nobody is explaining to you. Throughout the entire movie, no one's explaining it to you. Just like in life, when birds attacked people in Santa Cruz, nobody explained it to them because they didn't have an answer. It could have been anything. So I think what Hitchcock is doing throughout this movie is making the point, I guess, that there is no answer to it. He's giving you these institutions almost like science, religion. They have no explanation for it. And the reason that they have no explanation for it is because it's never happened before. So, all religion can kind of do is theorize at the fact that, the world is ending. It says so in this ancient text. Look, there's one thing that doesn't even relate to this about birds. All science can do is tell you there's this many birds. There are species of birds. These species are different. Look, we looked at a bird's brain one time. It's not very big. Which, if you know anything about crows, is not true. Crows are the smartest bird. Like, you know what I mean? So it's very significant that it's the crow attack, because crows are actually birds that can solve complex problems. It's like the one bird that can. So she's like, well, a bird, like a bird might, birds aren't very smart, so I can't see them doing this. That's all science can tell you about it. All fascism can tell you about it is let's kill all the birds, like the militarism of it. You know what I mean? So like altogether, like everything has failed you because this is an unknown, and it will always probably be an unknown because it's not something that's ever happened before. So I think what Hitchcock is kind of fucking with the audience about is like, how do we perceive things? How do we respond to things when there is no explanation for it?
Right. And I agree with that. I think that's what I was trying to say in a better way. Definitely. I also think the whole part where it seems like everybody starts blaming Melanie for things, I think and kind of the setup where every time she does something happens, I do think that's a way of fucking with the audience, in the sense that it's forcing two things together, where it's kind of forcing you to kind of engage in a scapegoat where it's like, oh, it's her fault, where maybe that's just messing with you. Maybe it's to show that how easy it is to make that connection, even though that connection may not actually make sense.
Yeah,
I feel like we're kind of having a lot of discussions around why it means nothing, but at the same time, the fact that there is at the central plot element is a lovebird, a pair of lovebirds getting caged by this lady and being gifted to this man as a sort of offer of some kind of affection or love, as a sort of building a relationship. And like it's a kind of actualization on the part of it's like an actualization on the part of of their romance, right? Like their romance is kind of budding, and the birds are supposed to represent that. But at the same time, the birds are being held captive by these people as a sort of gesture of their romance and all of that. And like to me, it creates the perfect conflict for the birds to actually attack them, and like kind of in a very straightforward way, literally that's what is happening. Like the birds are angry that that your entire purpose of raison the I don't know how that the reason to exist in French is basically caging two birds and sharing how they can't live without each other, and finding some sort of meaning in your life through that experience of caging these two birds. And I feel like that kind of sets up the conflict as a sort of clear clash of some sort of two sides here, like, because clearly the one side is imprisoning the birds and the other side is attacking the side that's imprisoning the birds. It's like as clear as night and day in this respect.
It's like the birds. It's kind of like a response to the birds, though, because it's like they're looking at the crows and the birds that are attacking are looking at the lovebirds that are in the cages. It's like this is our response to being somewhat imprisoned. We're just going to attack the people that are imprisoning us. It's like my thing is like this is like when nature
very Marxian in a solidaristic sense.
Yeah, like this is kind of like when nature is attacking back. Like the whole thing that I got from the movie is like, you know how we say things like, "Hey, we're gonna eat a lot of crow." This is like the sense of like, there's the crow eating us.
Yeah,
in a figuratively speaking sense. Like
I mean, I think that you're right about the fact that, and I think Karthik is too, that you're supposed to feel some type of solidarity with the birds. And I think that's the most straightforward reading, is that we literally do every possible, like even in that trailer, like we do every fucked up possible thing to birds. And now birds are like, we're not going to take it anymore. We're going to attack you. So I think that that's the most straightforward reading. I also think that very purposely it's left up to every possible interpretation of why the birds are attacking, because it's never explained. And it's never explained why it's just one town, because they're like, oh, well, I assume birds are attacking everywhere. The radio gets turned on. Nope, just your town. You know what I mean? Like, and they do leave that point up to it where every time there's a bird attack, the lovebirds start singing. So it's almost like the lovebirds are calling for the other birds to attack. But at the same time, you see at other places where there aren't lovebirds. But I mean, I guess, the guy that has his eyes pecked out, there's chickens there. But like, you know, like, so it's not necessary. So there's a lot of things. I think this is Hitchcock's ultimate MacGuffin film, because literally everything could be, and nothing could be. It could just be a straightforward case of birds are sick of getting attacked or getting caged and eaten. You know what I mean? Like,
well, I think that the idea that the birds mean nothing, I think if we're talking about what Hitchcock intended, that is a very realistic chance. Like the birds are attacking, and the real fear, the real reason for the film is
Charlie's cat keeps hearing birds and is like,
but so the reason they're attacking is not necessarily as important as what happens when we don't have an explainable reason why something bad is happening.
Exactly.
And
100%.
Which right, and if we're talking about in the mind of Hitchcock, like, and also what the film is telling us too. I'm not saying that that's not a good interpretation. And I find it interesting that we're watching or we're analyzing this film and having that mindset while also living in this COVID reality where people are caged up because of a natural disaster, essentially, and their causation and blame for the restrictions or some of the things that are happening to them aren't necessarily about what actually caused their imprisonment, but more the response. Like they want to point fingers, they want an easy answer, where the answer might not be as simple. It might be more complex.
And everything's failed them at that point. You know,
right? Absolutely.
Like, who do we look for answers? We look to science. I came up with this theory today while watching it and felt like, I felt like mind blown by it. But like, who do we like turn to? We turn to science, and science can only really tell us either what they've studied or in the past what's happened. So if something happens out of nowhere and you're asking for a scientific explanation, science is going to be like either like, oh, that can't happen. Like, you know what I mean? Like there's scientific rules like that can't happen. I'm sorry. Like maybe not like a scientist that really wants to study something, but just in general, like science is a concept. If something's never happened before, science can't explain it. Religion kind of does go to the end of the world. It's like, all of these things are signs. The world is ending. It must be a sign. And then there's like a very militaristic, there's birds attack you. Why not just kill every bird? And then science responds like, you can't kill every bird. There's too many fucking birds. Like there's billions of birds. How are you going to kill every single bird? And the militaristic mindset is like, just do it. Like just kill every bird. Like if you can, every bird needs to be gone. So it's like this constant tension that you're being given this thing that I'm going Cuomo again with the full hand gestures. But,
watch your webcams. Watch the webcams over here.
No, but like, so you're given this like, you're given a problem, I think, in this sense that has no answer, and there is an answer now, and apparently it's a much weirder one than I would have fucking expected, and we can touch on this at the end. That's going to be the big twist. It was me. I caused the bird. Anyway.
Yeah, I think it's a perfectly postmodern film where it's all about the perspectives and no one seems to have an answer and answers seem to contradict each other. I'm a bit of an existentialist. I think that's why I threw in that the birds might mean nothing. Because
that's why you commented on my meme post last night where I said
I am a cynic and I can't help myself. But yeah, well I was gonna say, so my use of the word nothing though is kind of like what Forrest was saying, where it's just a place for the projections of the individuals. It's not that the birds literally mean nothing. Obviously they mean something, otherwise they wouldn't be flying through doors. But I do think it's kind of interesting to relate it to COVID, though, where we're seeing people who, in fact, have information on a situation are still projecting their particular thoughts onto the world and sort of interpreting things in a different way, where maybe, the birds kind of are a prediction that even with science and religion and things like that, people would still not be able to resist the tendency to link two things that might not actually be linked, which
but
maybe
do we really have information? I mean, I think COVID is a perfect example. Like, did we really have information? Like, scientists can't tell you where COVID came from. Like, right now.
Well, I would say
There are
that
theories.
I would say that we have some information.
We have some information, but it's left up to what your both political and what your political and I guess research agenda is in that case.
Well, right, and that's why I was kind of relating it to the birds, because in a sense you have an object, information, but it doesn't really matter that it's there. What matters is more or less what you're projecting onto it. So like, you go through the different stages like you were talking about, where you ask religion and you ask science, and then you kind of go to a militaristic thing, and it's almost like showing, at least the way I interpreted it as well, is that it's almost showing that within technology and advanced societies, you still have that primitive base where we kind of react to things not by whether we have information about it or whether the event's happening. We kind of have a almost, I would say, almost primitive response where we're just looking for answers.
Yeah, no, I mean, we want an answer. Gianni, I just want to make this one point. The thing that we want is an answer, and the fact that we can't have an answer in the age of information. But I mean, this movie's obviously before that. But like making that point before that, the fact that we can't have an answer is like incredibly infuriating, and just like literally leads to fascism in some cases, because we're just like, the only possible answer can be violence. Let's eradicate the problem.
And I think, to add on to both your points about it, comparing it to COVID again, looking at it retrospectively, let's like rewind the clocks back to when we first experienced COVID, when America really got hit hard and the lockdowns happened. Compare that to these birds are attacking. It's not a coincidence. This is actually something big that's happening. You turn to science. Science doesn't know, because science doesn't have the tools to find it out that quick. It needs more time. You go to religion, and they had their way with it. And then at that point, we start to, like RC was saying, we go back to our primitive mindset of, okay, causation. All right, it came from China. It's the China virus, and those racist terms and connotations start becoming more clear and clear. And Melanie goes through that.
The military-industrial complex, like provably before the COVID started, had produced papers about how they wanted to pivot the strategy from the Middle East to China. So the fact that it like might have come from China. I mean, well, it did, like, you know what I mean? The fact that they can pinpoint it and say, this is where we decided that it's come from, fits in with a militaristic perspective of, for the rest of our, for the next, whatever, 40, 50 years, the only other superpower in the world is someone that we're going to have a Cold War with. Obviously, we can't really have a Cold War because economically we are literally the twin snakes. But like, like in this case, like, how can we fearmonger about this? Well, the fearmongering in this case is that, that it came from China. China either has a biological weapon, China is irresponsible. There's a bunch of different ways you can take that. But the fact that there isn't an answer leaves it open for that third possibility, I think, in the birds, which is kind of funny that it can be that closely put into it, because it's like when there's no answer to it, because all science can really tell you in the case of COVID is like, well, in 1918, the Spanish flu happened, and here's how we handle the Spanish flu. People put on masks, like, these things happened at this point, like in the summer, which was proved not to be the case. But, in the summer, because it wasn't flu season anymore, the 1918 flu dropped off pretty much for a little bit. And so that point for science is like, they can tell you that. They can tell you to wear a mask. They can tell you how not to spread germs. Science doesn't necessarily have an answer for where COVID came from right now because the evidence isn't there, which makes sense. But then, religion, there were plenty of preachers preaching about, why COVID was happening. And then the third one is fascism or militarism or whatever you want to project onto that one guy at the bar that's like, we should kill all the birds. And in this case, it's like, all right, well, our militaristic foreign policy kind of needs China to be our enemy for the next, because like the military industrial complex is hard for fucking China. Like China is a sucking superpower that for the end of time, probably with the amount of money that both us and the Chinese government produce, could be someone that we could fight endlessly. That's our arch villain right there. You know what I mean?
Right. That makes me think of Gore Vidal talking about how since the National Security Act in 1947, we've always had an enemy. First, it was the Soviets, and then it's been terrorists, and now we're looking at China.
Terrorists are kind of a trash enemy, because
yes,
you just keep making up terrorist groups or propping up terrorist groups,
right?
As we did with ISIS, like prop up the idea that this is the big terrorist group that we need to be fighting right now. Like you can be you can argue that endlessly, but at the same time, like you have to keep like kind of propping up these terrorist groups. With China, you don't have to do that anymore.
Right,
China,
exactly.
Literally, there's someone who has an economic standing that they can probably go to an endless war with you. And so many people that the thought of going to war with them is terrifying. That is like, for the military industrial complex, that's their, I don't know, that's their
that's what they need, because the military industrial complex
is it their MacGuffin?
Is
no, the ISIS was MacGuffin.
I mean, the military industrial complex to me is kind of a economic, an economy of lack, where we require an object to continuously throw money at the military. And I've noticed that the more in debt we go, the more we spend on the military, which is always interesting, because it means our prosperity is quite precarious. But to bring this back to is it Gianni? Am I saying that correctly? To bring it back to Gianni's point about feminism.
You gotta say it as Gianni.
I don't know. I'm pretty.
I respect
Jewish.
that.
I was gonna say I'm pretty Jewish. I'll try, but
I'm also drinking wine and wearing a pinky ring, so I'm really just asking for it.
But to bring it back to Gianni's point about feminism, what's interesting is if you make that parallel, which is a very interesting parallel, and you relate it to what we're talking about, where we develop primitive projections onto situations, whether we have information or not, you start to notice that when they start making Melanie the scapegoat, it's kind of showing that no matter how much we progress on social issues, and this might be a postmodern kind of pessimism, but no matter how much we progress on issues, we're going to come back to certain people, certain groups that are targets.
Right.
And so
the outsider itself.
Right. And so even with the progress is only as good as the crisis, or as the lack of crisis. Once there's a crisis, you start to project.
And I would argue that it's not in the way that dumb people like Joe Rogan use it, but like in the way that it probably should be used. Tribalism as a concept, like the idea that like it's a tribal sense of suspicion that like you're a cohesive unit, and the new element to the unit, because things have changed and you don't understand them. The new element to the unit is the thing that's to blame for that. And I mean, I think that there's a big three that Hitchcock is touching on, which is obviously science, like religion, and then like militarism. But then the fourth one kind of comes up when all of those women are staring at her, and there's like that very I actually like took a whole bunch of like screenshots when I was watching earlier, so I think I have that one as a screenshot to look at later, because I didn't know whether Gianni was going to come equipped with a million comments about angles. But I think that in that moment, the failure.
You and me both, Johnny.
The failure of all of those institutions result in a primitive I guess residual sense of suspicion, which is something that's existed since the beginning of time. I mean, no matter where you go. I mean, Italy, the homeland, but even when science could explain things, kind of a lot of the more papal loving Italian people reverted to that kind of thing, and right. All three of those things, all three of those other factions failing, kind of reverse us to a thing where, number one, it is like, in a very primitive sense, this thing has changed, so this must be the culprit, is kind of a logical jump, let's say, right? On top of that, the religious jump, obviously, is like, God is mad at us, so he's brought this person to us. The fascist jump is like, like the outsider is so kind of in the way all of those institutions, if you take it down to their most base sense, that's kind of a conclusion that you can reach from the three of them if they fail to give you a more modern interpretation.
Right. And I was gonna say that I lost my train of thought here. Hold on a second. Shit. Somebody else say something. I was
about to say, do you mind if I just quickly?
Yeah,
so when we talk about, I'm not too big on eugenics or the study or the falsehoods of it, but
eugenics on me.
But if you do notice, a lot of that island is full of blue-eyed people, and the threat of these outsiders, Melanie, and then even the school teacher, who, remember, is not a native to that land, and it's very clear that she is an outsider. It is very clear that there are physical distinct differences from the people of the island and people that are not of the island. And Mitch plays an interesting character of someone that's kind of halfway, of someone that spends a lot of time in San Francisco but visits not the island. I'm sorry, the bay. He spends half of his time in San Francisco and also the bay. The bodega
in which they're all inhabiting.
Right.
It's just one big bodega.
Right. Well, I was gonna say. So first off, I remember what I was gonna say. That makes me think of what what you were saying, Forrest. Makes me think of what Voltaire said. He said that history doesn't repeat itself; people do. And
we got a polemicist here, and he's gonna take us down a philosophic rabbit hole.
Well, basically, I mean, that's kind of how I read history, is that people tend to repeat themselves, and in what sense that is, it depends.
Reversion. I mean, reactionary reversion in this case.
Right. Exactly.
I think that and that's a point that philosophers have made since like the beginning of time. Kind of is about that reversion. But yeah.
Yes, exactly. And it makes me think of a TV show I've seen recently, Avenue 5, where basically the whole point of that is to show that no matter how advanced the technology gets, we as people are going to still be the same weird, ridiculous animals that we always have been. And so in the Birds, it's kind of the same way, but I think it kind of goes with the social critique that Gianni brought up, where it doesn't matter how much we've progressed. We've sort of when things get difficult, when there's a lack of firm information, or really you could even say firm customs, that progress is going to be questioned, and we're going to revert to primitive projections. Yeah.
Can I just say, like, the one thing with, like, all these deaths are going on? It's like, so, like, Suzanne Plachette played the teacher, and she's, like, the one probably shocking death in all of the movie, as far as I can see, next to the neighbor that had his eyeballs taken out by the crows.
Yeah, that's fair. And I think it's interesting. I don't want to go too far into psychoanalysis. It's only fun sometimes. But there's a British psychoanalyst known as Wilfred Bion. I don't know if anybody's read his stuff, but it's interesting to watch or listen to the people talk on the island about the reasons they're there. Because Melanie and the school teacher were there because of love, which Bion would call pairing. You're there because you're looking to find a mate. He has two other categories, which is dependency and fight or flight, for the reason that people on an emotional level form groups. And it seems to be that as things break down, they kind of go through that cycle of different emotions, where at first there's dependency, they're, they kind of, there's kind of a dependency where actually I should put it this way. It shows up mostly in the diner scene. First, there's a dependency where you have the ornithologist. I don't think I said that right. The scientist, who everybody starts relying on her information, but then it slowly but surely just
It kind of seems more like a bird watcher than a ornithologist.
Yeah, just a pretentious bird watcher.
Yeah.
But everyone starts kind of relying on her answers as she speaks up, and then she doesn't quite have all the answers. And then
she has no answers. She literally only has statistics that someone like Audubon Society or whatever the fuck can tell you. Like literally, like there's this many birds and there's this many species. She's literally just regurgitating out.
Right. Well, yeah. I use the word answer in kind of the more definitional manner, where it's like she has ansers. Doesn't mean that they're necessarily true or helpful.
From this level of discourse by not doing Ben's show right now. But I guess
well, they start relying on her, and then you have the guy who's saying it's the end of the world, and that's kind of the fight or flight sort of response, like, and you could kind of lump in the other guy who was talking about, just kill all the birds.
Well, he's all fight, right? Like in the fight or flight response. I mean, both science and religion are kind of the flight science is kind of just the denial option, like just.
Well, the dependency is what Bion would call it. They're kind of dependent upon whatever it is. They're just like, oh, this is not out of the ordinary, or oh, this is the end of the world.
Yeah.
And the fight or flight is the guy who says to kill them all. Pairing doesn't really. I mean, pairing technically plays here in a primitive sense because everybody starts to bunch up and they start, try to take the children away and sort of the.
Well, they go. I mean, honestly, on like almost like a Marxian level too. Like the dynamics of it are moving down from group to group. So like the community kind of fails. Like on a national scale, obviously it's failed. The community kind of fails. They're taking it down to the smallest possible unit, including getting rid of the one, the teacher who kind of is you can project as like kind of extended family, like to the point to have her help out with like raising the kid. Like to that point, she's cut out of the picture. All they have left is literally the dynamic of a family unit. I mean, not that like, I mean they're mates, they're the lovebirds. You know what I mean? Like so she doesn't really have to be. Any kind of like married into that family unit, but at this point, like she's been moved into this family unit, and at that point, that's all you really have in this situation. Right. Because you see a failure of every possible. And I mean, I like that Hitchcock isn't heavy-handed about this. Like he could have gone like, "Oh, here's the military. They don't know what to do. here's the government. They don't know what to do, but instead it's on a very local level.
Right.
So like they're literally just sitting around a diner being like, oh, what do we do? And they're like, I don't know. So you've seen a breakdown of every single level of which is a subversion of all of Hitchcock's previous work, if you think about it. Because there's the constant suspicion that breaks down families. There's the constant suspicion where one person in the family, like nobody knows, like that person's evil. Like he was talking about it even in that clip we watched. You know what I mean? It's like the wife doesn't know that, or you know what I mean? Like there's like a marriage and they don't know the other person's a spy. Like he's talking about that with suspense. Like the breakdown of all of those things was suspense is constant suspicion and cynicism. You know, like, and you're sitting there feeling that way the whole movie. Like, and after watch, I mean, I've watched Psycho probably like, I don't know, 15 times in my life. Like Psycho is a movie that I've watched a grotesque amount of times, no pun intended. And, and like, you know, the thing in the end is that like, this guy seems devoted to his mother. And the big reveal is that he killed his mother and is pretending to be her. Like, you know what I mean? Like that's the breakdown of the family unit on like a molecular level at that point.
Right. And so, yeah, you see,
unit is the only team that manages to persevere enough to, in their one specific case, probably get away from this.
Right. You see the failure of all institutions, basically.
Mhm.
Starting with the failure of the national institution, which doesn't even play part until it's too late. But to change
the scariest phrase in the English language. I'm from the government and I'm here to help.
Reagan would be proud.
Yeah, I haven't been able to go a single episode without a Reagan reference, so I needed to interject.
Well, Gore Vidal used to go late night show to late night show, making fun of Reagan's hair. So it's
probably cut him to the core more than anyone that actually had like a problem with his political policies.
Yes.
You gotta stop platforming Reagan for us.
Well, I was gonna say if you have me on more, every time he platforms Reagan, I'll platform Vidal, and we'll have
Reagan's
power.
ghost. Give Reagan his due. He's dead.
God,
dude, RC, I'll help you in that platform of Vidal.
Yeah, there you go. And you know, it's
I'll do the platform of Marx as well because I'm
there you go.
You've been talking to Marx. The only ghost I could contact is Reagan.
You see,
it's terrible.
You have
terrible. Every time I say anything about, you know, even vaguely liberal, let alone fucking socialist, Reagan comes down. He's like, well,
he's like,
right.
It's like Family Guy. He just comes down. He's like, Reagan smash.
The truth is, I've been stuck in the General Electric house, for the last 26 years of my life. I can't get out. I'm trapped. I've never been able to leave. I try to leave, and then executives from General Electric push me back in. So
this is why he likes Hitchcock movies. His life is just full of suspense.
It's
he never
like
knows when he's gonna escape.
I guess it related to like the whole like there's a stand-up comedy with Dana Carvey where he's talking about the Reagan Oracle, about who's going to be the next president. It's just like really hilarious. You're stuck in that dimension, Forrest.
I was gonna say one of the funniest things. One of the funniest things Vidal said about Reagan was he came on to the Johnny Carson show and he started it off by saying, "We have some bad news. We wanted to let everybody know that the Reagan Library has burned down, and all two books didn't survive." and he said the worst part about it is the president didn't have time to finish coloring either of them. So
see, you had me. I thought the punchline was going to be the two books. I mean, the thing that's really fucked us is that Reagan's library, the Reagan library is 2 books. Trump's library is just the McDonald's menu, like the dollar menu, and the dumbing down of like an already stupid reactionary movement has been awful. And Bush couldn't read, so there you go.
My inner cynic has a lot of fun watching these people. I wrote in an article recently that if all the far right people stop getting the vaccine and COVID takes them out, I don't have to listen to Marx anymore because it wasn't the revolution that took out the fascists; it was COVID.
I feel like we're shedding guests because Izzy left when we were I mean that's not why he left, but he left when I was roasting militarism. Karthik just left because we just went too hard on Reagan. You know,
Oh.
we're really weeding out all of our reactionaries.
Well, it's also making me realize why I only have like 3 friends. Maybe I keep shedding them.
Come on.
You have 3 friends?
Not really, but
Oh.
nevertheless,
We become friends, kind of, I see, through
I
Facebook.
I would say so. People have virtual friends now. It's easier for
Yeah.
What, Neopets?
they're Tamagotchis. Like if I forget to feed you, I'm sorry. I just want to see how long you go until you die.
Is that why your
They
cat's
call them
begging for
friends?
food right now? It's
What?
making me
No.
a little nervous.
Are they friends? Are they
I-
friends? Are they
Like
Sims?
Megapets.
We don't know. We don't
We don't
know.
we cannot confirm or deny the sources, but yeah, 3 friends. And as for my cats, I fed them twice today.
Those are the, you have 3. Yeah, all right. So that makes sense.
They have wet food. They've had wet food twice. They've got a food gravity thing that they knock over constantly.
The problem with having cats as friends, that I learned the hard way, is that if you forget to feed them for a couple hours, they stop being your friends.
Yes.
You have to keep feeding the cat friends, or else they quit on you.
They go
Right.
into a feral state. Kind
Yeah.
of.
Well, also the bad thing about naming one of my cats Ahab, which is a very famous literary character for those who don't read.
Famous.
From Moby Rock Hard Dick.
Yeah, the song, not the book. No. Every time I get mad at him, I have to yell at him, and then if I ever have to read about Captain Ahab again, I feel like I'm yelling at the captain. I'm like, stop it, quit it,
Actually,
knock it off.
This is a perfect point to bring us back to the birds. I
Yes.
think that Moby Dick is literarily, I guess, Moby Dick is kind of a proto version of this story, which is interesting. The next animal attack movie that obviously exists is Jaws. Like, the next
Right.
one on the line. So which Jaws is pretty much Moby Dick, but like, at that point we're like, well,
much more fierce.
no one's gonna make a whale scary. Like, you know what I mean? Like at this point.
Yeah, right. Like the whale's kind of it's scary because it doesn't think very much, and so it'll just crush your ship. But
because it's fucking huge.
Oh,
Like, the only
exactly.
reason why a whale is scary is because they're literally like, the biggest fucking animal. Like
it's like being
we
afraid
have
of
planes
a
now. You can't scare someone with a whale when you have a plane that could just fucking drop a bomb on a whale.
right. This is true.
Which is
And
why we need to kill all whales. Anyway,
it's kind of like being afraid of a really tall person in a small room. Once you open the door, it's not this.
I have a brother that's like 6'7", so yeah.
Right, and it's an interesting precursor, and this allows me to plug my favorite movie, which is The Edge, because that follows in the line of animals being horrible to human beings. Although that's about a bear, and
this is kind of the first the birds to bring us to that subject. Is the birds is kind of the first in a long line of movies that we've had since then, and it's been a popular concept in literature because when you read a book, you don't necessarily have to visualize in the way that you do with the movie. Like obviously I'm reading a book, like I have a very visual mind, like I'm imagining something, but really it is left to the imagination in a way that in movies obviously it can't be. So it kind of feels like Hitchcock is leaving this to the imagination in a way that can't exist in literature, and it is like the film. It is the first real film response to books like Moby Dick that kind of create the animal.
It's very American, because a lot of American literary works have animals attacking people. But it's also very not American because it's left without
That's why I only read books that Joe Rogan recommends.
Yeah, I'm only so smart because I take all those brain pills.
Brain Force. Which I'm glad you got my message to promote that, because as a sponsor of our show.
Oh my god. I don't think I could ever be on Joe Rogan's program without heavily offending him.
Me either. Oh, I thought you mentioned in general you couldn't be on it. I still absolutely thought the funniest thing that came out at TMBS, like working, like 2 years for Michael, I mean, you know, I miss Michael all the time because it felt like his and he felt like this too, but it felt like his platform was really growing because Joe Rogan called him Michael Roberts. And so he had a clip where like he was fucking dying laughing because Joe Rogan said, you know, Sam Cedar, Michael Roberts, and he just started like the fact that like Joe Rogan had clearly mentioned him, but like without knowing his name, he like had created a character named Michael Roberts that was like his
Oh God, my grandpa's
within a day of that happening though. He created that character within a day of Joe Rogan mentioning his name.
My grandpa's name.
I
Mike
saw
Roberts.
that was like my.
Oh well, yeah. All right.
Oh,
Well,
God.
Listen. Michael didn't cause that to happen. Joe Rogan.
Oh no, it's all good. Last thing I want to throw out there, and I have not seen other Hitchcock movies. I know of Hitchcock mostly through the articles on psychoanalysis I've read.
All right, so you pretty much watch Hitchcock movies.
I don't know. But basically, there was a point made in one of the articles I was reading that there's usually the appearance of milk in Hitchcock movies. Like there's like 11 of the movies.
The human equivalent of milk. Like he looks like a human interpretation.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And so I thought it was interesting that it's not in the Birds, but I don't know what the significance that has. So I'm going to throw that out to you guys, since you guys have.
Well, I got something. I got something right here for you. It's a pipe bomb under your chair right now. No, I have a clip to I have a clip to play because this is amazing.
Oh, Dick Cavett, yes.
Yeah.
You called actors cattle once in your career and offended a few of them.
Well, I think at the time, I said I was accused of calling actors cattle, and I said that I would never say such an unfeeling, rude thing about actors at all. What I probably said was that all actors should be treated like cattle.
I see. And you went on to do that.
In a nice way.
Yes. Fed them at the right hours and brushed them occasionally. Well, I know you. One actress got you for that somehow. She once had some cattle brought onto a set or something.
That was the famous Carol Lombard.
Carol Lombard,
yes. Yeah. And she was a woman with a great sense of humor. And I arrived on the set the first day of shooting, and she'd had a corral built, and in it were 3 live calves with the names of the actors on big discs round their necks.
Wow.
If I'm good to just jump in there really quick, I was going to talk about the aesthetics of Jaws and the Birds and how Hitchcock adored Russian montage and editing, and you can see it in the Birds very clearly, and Jaws extremely was influenced by it. But the other thing about Hitchcock is he is like one of the last. And when I say one of the last, like, I mean, going into the 60s and 70s, he was still making films and was still well regarded. But he was one of the last old school filmmakers.
Yeah, old Hollywood.
Yeah, one of the last old Hollywood directors that were like, nope, I don't care what you think your character would do. I'm telling you to do this. If I want you to walk over there and stare out a window and you don't want to do it, I don't care. I'm the director. I tell you what to do.
I'm going to dump hot lava on you. Well, all right. I'll counter it with this. There are definitely filmmakers that come within this time period that subscribe to that don't necessarily have that power. But there are filmmakers who subscribe to that like dictatorial vision. Francis Ford Coppola is a perfect fucking example of it because he said during his filming Apocalypse Now, he said he said that, you know, society is kind of breaking down those bonds of like power, and he said the last dictatorial which is my film nerd quote of the day, I guess, the last dictatorial relationship that you can really have is between a director and an actor, where you can literally force somebody to do something that they really.
We so got to do Coppola.
Yeah,
because I've seen The Outsiders. We have to watch that movie. That's like one of my.
Is that the only Coppola movie you've seen?
Yeah, but
Yeah,
I'm open to seeing Apocalypse Now. The Rumble
Well, I'm
Fish.
glad you're giving Apocalypse Now such a good chance.
It's like on my top 7 like favorite films of all time. Like the fact that you're like, I'll check it out. Is like
It's fun. It's funny that you say that about directors because Gore Vidal wrote an article about working in the.
Oh my God, is Gore Vidal paying you?
Yeah, yes, he is. It's how I. It's
The
how
late
I can,
Gore Vidal.
It's how I can afford.
Yeah, late with those
such a
payments.
nice.
Where that money at?
It's how I can afford such a nice 1-bedroom apartment. No, but he was talking about. He made a snide remark. He said that directors see themselves as the author of the film, but everybody else sees them as the brother-in-law they don't really want to talk to. So it's interesting that you're talking about, directors who don't listen, they have dictatorial power, and I that's the quote that popped in my head. Maybe they are dictators, maybe it's true, but apparently some people treat them like brothers-in-law.
I mean, I don't know. An interesting point, I guess, and I feel like this might be what Gianni was about to say, but I don't know. Tippi Hedren, who was the actress in The Birds, Hitchcock kind of had an obsession with her and ended up, I mean, I don't know. She claimed, at least in her memoir in 2016, that Hitchcock ended up sexually assaulting her in a dressing room because he was like enamored with her and he was willing to like, he was trying to throw away his marriage and just assumed that because she was first. So in The Birds, this didn't happen, but in Marnie, which is the next film that Hitchcock had made, which, he had like a kind of two film deal with her, I guess, and she starred in both of them. In Marnie, he kind of walked into the dressing room and sexually assaulted her during the filming of it, and so it's kind of like this, and then famously, obviously, he was throwing birds at her, which is what you do when you have a crush on someone. You just you're like a 12-year-old, and you just throw things at them until they respond.
The other irony of this is that Tippi Hedren was an animal rights activist.
Yeah,
so,
which makes sense. I mean, it's not irony. The kind of if you wanna perceive it in that sense, The Birds is kind of an animal rights activist movie. Like it is something that jives with that because literally, kind of the point that Hitchcock's making throughout that trailer. I mean, the most straightforward reading is we've killed, caged, maimed, everything you could possibly imagine, hunted birds for too long. And birds are now striking back. I think that when this movie is being written, there's a million interpretations. But like, if you wanted to go with just the straightforward, like the most, A to B interpretation that you possibly could, like we fucked with birds for a very long time. Hitchcock says it in the thing. There are hats. There are dinner. Because he's like even unthinkingly just like eating a bird. You know what I mean? Like, so it's all these things combined. Like we kill birds. We kill so many birds. Just like we do with everything, but like birds very specifically in that time, because I don't think anyone would dare to wear like a hat just that had a dead bird on it now. But like, in the 60s, like if you were high society, one sign that you were high society, I mean, one of them was furs, which is already, we're mammals and you're wearing a mammal, which
she wears in the film. That's her coat that she brings to the bay.
But the other thing is a lot of people that were rich, even in the early 20th century would just have birds on their hat, like just dead birds. Like imagine, so the most straightforward reading is like birds see that. There's a socialite walking around. Birds see that and they're like, yo, we need to strike back, which I don't think is the real reading of the movie because the movie goes in depth on so many other levels. But the reading that you could have in that sense is like, we've killed so many birds that birds are ready to kill us, essentially.
Yeah, I think the only person who wears furs and stuff now is what's her name, Anna Wintour or whatever, the lady who inspired Devil Wears
Prada. I know. I've met plenty of girls that wear furs.
Oh, I
want at least one fur.
Well, I should put it this way. You said that they wouldn't wear the feathers, and I feel like if you told that to her, she'd take it as a challenge.
I mean, I think you could wear feathers though, and not necessarily kill a bird. I think when it came to those, I mean, I think people do for feathers, but I'm saying like I don't think that necessarily is like you could find enough feathers, I guess, technically.
Oh, I was just trying to call Witcher evil, but
I was just trying to tell you that.
I know.
I'm trying to tell you that I've been killing lots of birds.
Can I just say, man, I take back my ironic statement. I know I'm going to eat a lot of crow, and crow's going to a lot of eat me.
Well, you don't eat crow?
No.
Gianni and I are from a region of the Hudson Valley where
we have pro sommeliers. We're like,
Sometimes
This crow
you're
is from Gardner.
Can you
sometimes
like taste the
there's
crow?
a crow that's been in a lot of bad areas. You don't want this crow, and I'm like, dude, are you fucking racist? You're telling me this crow's from Newburgh, and I'm just.
Answer me this though. Can you guys taste the crow?
I taste crow every day when I'm wrong.
All right, I'm going to take this back to the birds if you don't mind.
The only last thing I wanted to say is you were saying that he was throwing the birds to show his love, and I was going to say that we've come far away from the ancient Greeks who used to toss each other apples as proposals for marriage.
Oh, that's not what I thought you were going to talk about. Greeks tossing. Never mind. The salad, Greek salad. Where do you guys think I was going with that?
I just really wanted to quick touch on more just because my background is more in filmmaking and stuff like that. His use of montage in this film, I feel like, is very unique to how else he's done, like North by Northwest and Rear Window and things like that. You can see how he edits and how different it is from like some of those films. Very specifically, the scene where the mother walks in and sees like the person that sells her the chicken seed, and how she essentially sees that trauma, which I think is a very real interpretation of how you process trauma at first hand. You don't see it, in like, life slows down and sound effects increase. You like kind of see it, and it takes your mind to process it, and you go through these skips. And in the same way, the film jumps from like the foot to the head, to closer to the head, to the eyes in a very effective way. And then he does this again later on at the school when you see crows sweeping in. One is lining up to the bars, two is lining up to three, and then you're like, okay, so next time it's gonna be like 4 or 5. And then you find that shot of the bird coming, and boom, there's like 100 crows on there. It's a very effective way of montage. Again, he was playing around with a lot of some of the Russian editing techniques of the early 1930s, late 20s. But to end it on more of like a comedic note, I think that he overdoes it in a way, because one of the last times he does it in the film is when that car explodes, and you see like he wants to be all like technical with it and like make it like this artsy thing, with Melanie like looking this direction, watching the flame drag, Melanie looking the other direction, watching, and it just seems so like, okay, we get it, dude. Like, you watched a Russian film in 1925. Like, you made your point. Like, you're going a little overboard here. But I do think it's important to recognize that he was playing with the medium and at such a experienced and non-fearful way. He was caring about playing around with like different techniques and stuff like that, inspired from other filmmakers.
My bad. I was still muted. Yeah. So I didn't know how prepared Gianni was going to be, so I captured a bunch of shots that I liked in it, because I thought maybe Gianni was going to pull a Cale Brooks and send me like a folder full of shots, and then do a 4-hour stream. So I wanted to be somewhat prepared. So this is the the scene where it zooms out, which honestly I think is hilarious. This part of it, because I think it's honestly one of the funniest parts of the movie, because you see this and it's already fucking terrifying to see an entire town kind of starting to be engulfed in flame, and I think it's going back to, because it's right after that diner scene that we're talking about for a long time. The diner scene where they're kind of responding to this unknown factor, and it's like, all right, well, everything's broken down. Even the fascist element of it is broken down. What happens? Well, a guy, the guy drops a cigar, and the whole town catches on fire, because the obsession with having to know the answer, or like having to have an answer to it, just leads the town to kind of get destroyed. But the funniest part, I think, in this scene, which because I watched it this third time as a, I really wanted to make sure that, however prepared Gianni was, I was on his level. Like, I didn't, so So I watched it a third time today after watching it twice. Whatever, I did took a lot of notes. Like I have a whole Google Doc with a bunch of notes that I didn't end up using. But I think that this is the funniest scene to me because you see this fire and then you see a bird and then you see a second bird and there's just birds right in front of the camera blocking your view of a town burning. And it's like this, like the town burning is probably the most interesting thing that happens to the town in the entire movie. And it's like, well, why don't we just add some fucking birds? Like you got to remember, like, because the birds aren't causing the fire. The unknown quantity of being in a situation where no one can answer the question, ends up causing the fire. Nobody has information, and the chaos explodes. And the birds actually don't do it. Just as, like, in some ways, I don't think the birds. I mean, the birds quite literally kill people, but like in the sense of like you can see someone get pecked a bunch by birds. They don't fall down or something. The birds don't overwhelm them, and the person kind of survives. You know what I mean? Like the lack of information, the chaos, in some ways, is what's killing people. In that sense. So it's funny that there's just like a bird that comes in front of the camera and then a second bird and then a third bird.
I thought it was interesting that the birds attack in waves, that there's moments of peace.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's to show
that's suspense. When you build suspense, you need those moments of humor.
I hate tea. I don't want to talk in that accent. Go ahead.
Do you mind if I? Okay, because one, Forrest, if I knew I could send you a folder, I would have.
Yeah, I didn't tell you for that reason.
I mean, if you ever do a taxi driver or bicycle thieves, like,
I purposely didn't indulge. Well, I think I might have quickly, but the information that I told you about the 4-hour Cale Brooks Shining stream, where on Ben's show where it was his birthday and he was just hammered and Cale sent me a folder, and then every time we strayed away from his folder, he'd be like, "Yo, the folder though." Like I purposely wasn't like, "Hey Gianni, send me a folder," but I do have a bunch of shots in this that I did want to get to. I mean, we're getting close to 2 hours, and we cut it off for 2 hours, but I do want to talk about this movie a lot because I've seen it like a dozen times.
Well, I mean, I would love to talk about aesthetics because to me this is the most interesting aesthetic Hitchcockian film.
Mm-hmm.
But even this shot it tells such an interesting story because there's not another shot like it in the film.
Yeah.
Hitchcock is very dry bones. I want my characters front and center. But notice, like you said, that chaos was only created by the humans' unknowingness, by their fear, and because of how they've reacted to things, while also their ignorance to their outside world.
The movie, and I think that in different shots he alludes to it because the thing that ends up killing people isn't that a bird attacks them, the same bird attacks them, the thing that ends up killing people is that in their fight or flight response, going back to that part of the conversation, birds overwhelm them. They're overwhelmed by birds, and they're overwhelmed. Like if there was an answer to it, they knew how to fight back. There is no answer to it. They don't know how to fight back. They're overwhelmed by the bird's very existence.
But to even add on to that, like, so what caused this is a bird hit a person in the head and the gas of the car that he was filling up lows, and our favorite fan has a message for you on here. Which one though? Is it La Dolce Vita or Even Antoni? Because La Dolce Vita is also my favorite film of all time, and I could talk about it for hours.
That's your favorite film?
Favorite film of all time.
I thought you hated that film.
Everybody does. It's so boring.
You've only sent me the MP4 of it 3 times.
I've been trying to prep my girlfriend to watch it, and it's like it's my favorite film of all time. Yeah, there we go. I'm like, it's super boring. Nothing happens, and it's 3 hours long. Like, you're not gonna like it.
She's not used to that by now. If we feel like you're.
I try to like balance it.
Understand a word, and I'm not putting on subtitles. So.
But anyway, just to get back to the point that I'm trying to make really quick on this shot is that the scene that this happens in is a causation of birds, but also the ignorance of them around. The guy that lights the cigar is very like whatever 100%. Of the birds.
100%. The guy doesn't even seem to know that's the guy only drops the cigar because he's so surprised by a bird attacking him. It seems like he's just coming to town. He's not necessarily even aware that there is a bird attack.
Yeah, and he's just like, oh, I'll show you guys the way out of here. Like, no big deal. But the interesting thing about this is that we're looking at either that people call it the eye of God or the bird eye shot of above the town, and it starts off at this, and then birds then envelop the frame as if
birds develop the literal bird eye shot.
Exactly, and it shows that the birds are now like, okay, we've caused this chaos, now let's go in and continue it. And after the shot, obviously, the birds have their most vicious attack on the town that makes it look more apocalyptic by the end of the film.
Yeah. Well, I would argue that the scene before that kind of makes it look a lot more apocalyptic. And the thing that I think is incredibly beautiful about Hitchcock's filmmaking towards the end of the film, because the vast majority of the film, you're not actually seeing like bird attacks. You know what I mean? Like, it's kind of the only thing leaving you in suspense in that case is the promise that at some point a bird's going to attack people, which makes sense because who doesn't want to see a fucking bird attack people? But like, you're watching a movie with the intention of being like, all right, like, when's there going to be a bird? You know what I mean? Like, after that one slight gull attack. And I'd say the scene that I think is the most apocalyptic is the one that Hitchcock does the most beautifully, and it's my favorite scene in the movie, where she's sitting on the playground and for some reason hasn't fully acknowledged that there might be like a bunch of birds attacking, and she's smoking a cigarette, and you see the birds landing behind her until the entire jungle gym, or is enveloped just by crows. And it really just is this scene that, like, you realize, like, these birds not only are they like, not only are they attacking, they are organized, and they are sitting here waiting for a moment where they can attack. And she kind of slowly, which builds the suspense so much more, obviously, like, kind of creeps away back into the school, and they don't do anything, which, when you're expecting something, because the last like 4 scenes have all involved bird attacks, like, and you're expecting a bird attack and there is no bird attack, that is far more suspenseful, I think, than if the birds had just attacked her at that moment. Like, you're like, oh fuck, what's gonna happen? But it mirrors the scene in the beginning, when she's at the dock and she's playing a prank on him, and there's the exact same shot composition, where it's her face and she's laughing, and then the dock, and then she turns around, she looks back, there's the dock, it's her, like, it does this like 1-2 shot combination. And when she's on the playground running away, it does the exact same thing. But this time, it's no longer kind of like a whimsical. You're like, oh look, like, they're, this is their relationship. She's kind of playing a prank on him. She's like, all of a sudden, it's terrifying because there's a pretty fucking big chance that every bird on that jungle gym is going to go for her at once, and doesn't. But like, in that sense, like, you don't know whether that's going to envelop her. And I think that that's the most successful. And they have the creepy wibbly wobbly da 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 thing, like the kids singing that in like an incredibly, like, almost like fascist way all at once. You're listening to every kid in the school kind of singing this nursery rhyme, and the nursery rhyme, like, looking up the words today, was about how like a Scottish guy ended up beating his wife for not like cleaning the house the right way. So it's kind of like it's terrifying in that sense already. And then you're watching her kind of like look back at these birds. It's uneasy. And you don't know what the birds are going to do. What the guy in the Scottish song kind of does to his wife: envelop her, beat the shit out of her, destroy her. In that sense,
watching that scene today made me realize how close she could come to, like, actually being the solely one attacked by the birds on the jungle gym.
Yeah,
if we're talking about the scene,
she's the only one out there. And an interesting corollary to that, I guess, is that the lady that's like the dumb ornithological Audubon science lady kind of says at one point, oh, birds don't flock together. In this movie, the birds don't flock together. So her scientific point on that doesn't make any sense, because in that movie, you see a gull attack, you see a sparrow attack, you see a crow attack. You don't see necessarily those birds all attacking all in one, like, you know what I mean? Like, they don't mix, which I guess goes to Gianni's eugenics point almost. Like, you don't see those birds mixing together as a flock. You see waves of birds, as they do also by staying still. You see different waves of birds, which also makes it more terrifying because they're organized in that sense. They're not like all the birds in the town aren't attacking you at once. Waves of different kinds of birds are attacking you. And you start to realize how many different types of birds there are. You start to realize, like, in that sense, how many, like, small birds can get through your, like, you know what I mean? Like the hole in the ceiling or whatever that would have existed, or the hole in the roof that would have existed maybe in like an open house. like a sparrow can get through that, but a gull maybe can't get through that. You know what I mean? Like, or gulls can just peck. Like, I don't think gulls can actually peck through a door, but like in that sense, like, you start wondering, like, if a bird had murderous intention, I was just saying, you know what? I don't care about whether I live or die. I'm just gonna keep pecking through this fucking door. Like, could a door withstand that? Could a window withstand that? How many different things in your house couldn't withstand a beak just repeatedly drilling into it? Like, it starts to be terrifying for that reason too, because you start thinking about your own house and how many different places a bird could get into your house. So like it stops just being terrifying because it's like, oh wow, like, you know, someone's getting pecked to death by birds. You start thinking like, what if a bird wanted to attack me, which isn't a logical thought? So suddenly Hitchcock has dragged you into his illogical, suspenseful horror world because you're sitting there thinking like, well, all right, but like, what if this happened? How would I survive it? And you wouldn't. And it's like, it's terrifying for that reason as well.
So two really quick things. One is on the eugenics point, but before I even get to that, the scene where the crows are all on the jungle gym, and then they go inside and they get the kids to escape and they all run. Again, going back to how inspired Hitchcock was of Russian filmmaking, if you compare that scene to the stair step scene in Battleship Potemkin, it is nearly shot, not shot for shot, but the feeling is the same, of everybody running away from this increasing danger that is only creeping closer to them. It is incredible if you were to watch those scenes back to back, how much they influence each other. And then really quick,
I have to quickly make this joke. I just think, you know, pecking her to death 6 times was too many, and you know, I would have, you know, even pecking her to death 2 times was too many. I'm sorry. Go on.
It's all right. But then back to the eugenics point, it's even flirted in the beginning of the film, and even in a way becomes a main, I wouldn't say a main theme, but a central occurrence in the film. Is in the beginning of the movie, they talk when she's acting like she's works for the bird shop, the pet store. She says like, oh, well, you know, we have to keep these birds in cages, otherwise they would get out and cause all these problems, especially in the molting season. Right. Especially, you know, so they essentially don't want these birds to breed and mix, which goes back to that whole eugenics claim, but then also goes back to the whole people end up staying inside, locked inside their houses kind of thing that ends up happening at the end of the film. Essentially, the birds make the humans retreat to their cages in a way.
Well, John said, you know, eating crow is a phrase. I mean, birds of feather flock together, like, you know, but in that sense, like, waves of birds are terrifying because there's like so many different kinds of birds. Like, let's say that they don't, like, I think it kind of would have been more absurd if a whole bunch of birds altogether had fucking attacked someone, because you couldn't really figure out which birds were attacking. The fact that at one point it's seagulls, which are already kind of terrifying. I've been pecked by a seagull, like, you know, earlier today actually, and I did no, when I was a kid, like living in Maine, and you would be eating like chips on the beach and you wouldn't move very much, a seagull would just try to come take the chip out of your hand. Like, you know what I mean? Like, seagulls are kind of fearless in that sense. And, you know, I mean, songbirds and sparrows are obviously the ones least likely to attack you. In that sense, but kind of Hitchcock's playing on the fact that crows are the most intelligent bird. So when she's like, well, crows don't have the brain pattern. No, they fucking do. If a bunch of crows, like, which is obviously a murder of crows, like the actual term for it, like, you know, if a bunch of crows wanted to attack you, they can solve complex problems. Like, that is a terrifying, and, you know, that's not something that they didn't know back then either. You know, like they've been doing experiments on crows for a really long time, thinking like, oh, well, a crow and yeah, she knows the difference between like a crow and like a blackbird or whatever, but like the woman doesn't know that like a crow is incredibly intelligent and like a blackbird is not.
I thought it was ravens. Not that it makes a difference at all.
No,
I thought it was.
I double checked it.
All right.
I didn't want to bring up that point. I'm sorry.
Right. No, you're fine. But the only other thing I have to contribute also isn't really relevant. But every time you say that the birds are organized, I think of that movie Chicken Run, and it makes me laugh. So.
Oh, it makes me think of Karthik earlier making the point about solidarity with the birds, which I think in some sense you are supposed to feel. Like, even that trailer, you're supposed to feel some sense of solidarity with the birds as a caged and oppressed class. You know, in the way that Karthik wanted to bring it up at the beginning, a class that that is getting organized, and it's like it's terrifying because we're obviously humans and they're birds, and you would be on the receiving end of that. But then watching even the trailer and realizing how many different fucked up things we do to birds, yeah, Karthik.
I kind of wanted to ask, like, how you feel any kind of solidarity with the characters in the first place. I all of the terrifying and of the birds, like, I watched it almost like it was a comedy. Like, I was on the side of the birds, and I felt none of the I mean, I'm calling it. It's difficult to even call them humans because it's like it's just elite bourgeois society, and I feel zero of the kind of the struggles that they faced because they couldn't deal with the birds. Like all the three things that you pointed out, that is just like elite society figuring out how to deal with a problem of like property damage and things like that. That's basically all that's happening. It's just like, holy shit, these people are rioting, these birds are like lighting things on fire. What do we do with them? How do we contain them? That's the kind of impression that I get out of the society that the birds are attacking. So I kind of, and since you point out the blue eyes and like the fascist kind of singing and all of that, zero empathy. I kind of feel like I was entirely on the side of the birds, and it almost like no tension in the movie other than the fact that like the attacks couldn't start quicker. So I was just like,
the only tension in the movie besides the birds, will they, won't they? And you don't know. You don't know, folks. You don't know whether they're gonna fuck.
And the thing is that, like, the sort of scene where they like even introduce the problem and talk about it inside the room for the first time after the birds break in through the chimney. I forget exactly the nature of the exchange, but it's just like entirely about like they damage the property. Yeah. It's kind of like the utensils that were hanging, the china that was hanging on the mantelpiece. Oh yeah.
Well, if I could just...
more the mother probably, not the woman. She's like unassuming. It's more the mother who probably deserves it in Psycho. Well, like, because that's the subversion. That's the anti-authoritarian act. Like after that, like if anything, the character kind of assumes the position of the maternal authority, and like even the same thing happens in Joker. Like it's just the character kind of assumes the position of like the nagging mom, and then like inflicts the violence of that he endured to the external person. Like so same thing.
Humans in Hitchcock films, a lot of times humans are kind of just archetypes, right? Like you kind of expect a certain pattern from them. They fit into these tropes. They fit into certain archetypes. And the usual Hitchcock subversion is that they break away from it. You know what I mean? Like Norman Bates being a mama's boy in Psycho, the breakaway from it is that he's murdered his mom and he has become her as his alternate personality. The trope though is that as a mama's boy, he's like, oh well, I love my mom's just I'm taking care of her. Hitchcock breaks away from that trope by completely subverting it. In this movie, I think the reason that you feel like the characters are one-dimensional and you don't connect with them is because the only thing that actually is being subverted is the birds. Like the birds attacking people is a subversion of their normal psychological behavior. You think throughout the movie that other characters are going to have that. They don't. Other characters are literally just these tropes. Like, I mean, the diner scene is obviously the biggest representation of that, when it's just literally tropes that have been repeated. Now, like, it's weird to watch these movies on the other side of it because I think, there's been, which is why also I think people feel like Hitchcock movies a lot of times are cornier than they probably were at the time, is because pretty much every movie has taken like Hitchcockian tropes. But he's kind of creating like these archetypes. You're waiting for him to subvert one of them. He doesn't. The only thing that really is subverted in this movie is the fact that you think birds are fine and they're murderous. Like that's the only thing that really in this movie gets subverted. So like there's these, it's kind of like a not to be too Jordan Peterson about it, I guess, but like the consuming mother, like, you know what I mean? Like, and you think that she's going to consume him. She doesn't. She's just literally afraid of being abandoned. She wants whatever, she wants to kind of be assured that he's not going to go away. There's all these relationships that seem internally damaging, and they seem like they're going to play into these dynamics that we've seen a million times, and they don't play into those dynamics. They're just kind of flawed maybe is the wrong word, psychologically archetypical people that kind of don't behave like things are just normal. Like it's a fucked up family. It's a fucked up family. The dad died. Like, you know what I mean? Like it's a family that's been through some trauma. She's been probably through some trauma too, I'd assume. But like they never quite, the character development isn't there. So you're like, oh, I don't really feel for what you feel for is the fact that the character development happens because of like the birds have character development, which is kind of an insane thing.
This to me is like basically the reason why I feel like it's more like a post-colonial reading is deserved, because like the humanization of the birds is like, sorry.
No, there's 100% like a post-colonial reading of the birds. Like
the humanization of the birds is kind of like it's not, they're no longer subhuman, and they're kind of like claiming their rightful place in history, etc. But also on the other hand, like since we talked about this, and I feel like we didn't even engage at come at the topic from this angle. So I wanted to ask, since we did so much of nuclear and Cold War type stuff in the previous shows that I've been on, I wanted to ask like what you thought of the idea of the birds as like a nuclear testing. But the birds as nuclear testing on an island where like these plastic dummy figurines of people are existing, and then the birds are just basically the whatever, like the specter of nuclear tests being conducted on their own people, etc.
So I wonder what I wish I had clipped this, because there was a thing that I watched earlier where Hitchcock was talking about in 1944, a year before we dropped the atom bomb to end the war, he had predicted kind of like the atomic the atomic situation, I guess. And there's a clip with him, another one of those Dick Cavett episodes where he's talking about how in his mind he had predicted uranium as a source of nuclear technology. So I wish I had clipped that for that answer.
Uranium.
Well, two things, and I know we're past the 2-hour mark, but
yeah, I wanted to go through a couple more aesthetic things before we signed off. So at the end of this part of it, I wanted to go through it with you, especially because I took a couple 2 shots and I wanted to get your opinion on them specifically, honestly. But
I'll talk movies all day, so I have no problem, especially if you want to talk aesthetics. But just 2 things. So I think it's interesting that you make the kind of Godzilla sort of comparison with the birds, as if like, we've disturbed nature enough with our own man-made catastrophes, so the catastrophe comes to us through nature. But to go back to the mother point, because
it's funny after watching Planet of the Apes this week, because that was the exact point made by Planet of the Apes.
What's crazy is I just got the Godzilla Criterion Collection, like that big release thing that they had, and so I've been watching Godzilla films, and I've been like,
can you lend that to me when
I cannot.
just for a couple weeks.
Maybe. Yeah. It's beautiful. It's really beautiful. Anyway, so my movie collection is like right here, and it's just one of my favorite things in my life. But so
just out of screen.
Yeah, just out of here. I could rotate it a little bit.
All right, I believe
show the beauty of it all. But anyway, something I really wanted to touch on, and again, one reason why I keep taking this film into more of a feminist lens is because I feel like the mother, if you look at like other interpretations of this film, she really gets blamed a lot for the reason why the birds attack. And to me, the mother is such a misunderstood character, which again is so much of what happens with or so much of what happened with women and feminism at the time, where they would catch the blame for so many of the problems when really they are victims of the society that has made them be the type of people that wake up every day and want to make breakfast for their husband that died years ago, just as the mother goes through.
Loneliness is what's driving her.
Absolutely.
And I think that you're not in conversation with the film itself. You're in conversation with Hitchcock when they're having the conversation, and she says, "Oh, so the obsessive controlling mother," and she's like, "No, I don't think that's what that is."
Yes, the school teacher you're talking about, the conversation with the school teacher.
Kind of, it starts off very passive aggressive, and it turns into this kind of very open dialogue, and I think you're really who you're talking to is Hitchcock in that sense, because you're talking to Hitchcock, who has spent his life kind of making these movies a lot of times, especially Psycho, the one right before this, where it's obviously, you know, incredibly flawed. And I think he kind of had a flawed relationship with his mother too, because I want to play this clip at the end, but there's a clip that I have where he makes this strange joke on Dick Cavett that I think is kind of funny about how his mother scared him, and that's why he's like, I don't know. It's an interesting moment, but I think that you're really in dialogue with Hitchcock himself when she's like, oh, well, it must be like an obsessive and like controlling mother. And she's like, no, it's a mother with fear of abandonment. Like her husband died and you know, she has a young daughter and she's afraid of being abandoned. And, you know, it makes her act in ways that she doesn't necessarily want to, which is different than when you're maybe watching another Hitchcock film where the mother is controlling by definition and wants to control her son's life. I don't think this mother really is, and gets the brunt of the blame for that fact, but also is someone dealing with psychological issues. And I think Hitchcock is kind of fucking with the audience by being in dialogue with the audience, being like, listen, I'm not doing that in this movie. Like, this is something that I'm moving away from this movie. And like you have to deal with that. Like it's expected. And that's the suspense. It's expected that this woman is going to control her son's life. And that's not what's going on. And you literally sense that in dialogue. I think.
Really quick, I mean, like, seriously, one sentence. Like, he very specifically says in that scene, like, all due respect to Oedipus, I don't think that's what it is.
Yeah.
And that is such a blatant, like, point to literary analysis of, like, oh, we have this trope of, like, the mother-son dynamic. No, this isn't what it is. It's she's scared of being abandoned. She's scared of her post being uprooted because that's all she knows.
Which, obviously, the most Oedipal, really, movie ever created is Psycho right before that. So I didn't think about all this stuff until today, really. But like, you know, the third time I was watching through it, I was thinking like, all right, like he's kind of, because I'd watched interviews with him right before this movie came out, and it was like, you know, he's talking about how like he doesn't want necessarily to be pigeonholed into this. That movie had found obviously incredible success, which all of his movies did. But like, you know, yeah, no, literally, as J. Hutch says, he's reacting against Psycho. Like he's reacting like. He's a creative. Well, he's not a auteur. He's reacting to the thing that he's created, and he's in conversation with the last movie he did, which is, you know, one of the most, honestly, like to this day, most successful movies of all time, as is a lot of Hitchcock stuff. But Hitchcock, I think, was reacting to himself, kind of becoming this, you know, this trope, this very incredibly predictable auteur that kind of everyone was like, oh well, I know what to expect in a Hitchcock film. This movie kind of breaks all of those Hitchcockian rules. So I wanted to, I mean, as a quick, I guess, last thing, I wanted to look through some of these shots. This is a two shot that he did when she discovers like the guy that had sold her the chickens had his eyes pretty much pecked out. So this is the first. So this is her walking into the room.
They look more gouged out, but hey, that's just me.
This is her walking into the room, and then. Direction. Yeah, so then you just see his feet, which builds the suspense of it. And then you see her. I feel like Bray doing this, by the way, Gianni. I feel like I'm Greg Bray, you know, teaching. My power just went out for some reason. Am I still on?
Yeah, you're still on.
I don't. Oh, then maybe I just knocked this with my foot. So yeah, so so it's. Hold on.
There you go.
Hold on. But yeah, so it's so she's reacting to this, and then let me see if I can do it without turning this thing back on. No, I can't. Wait, hold on 1 second. I'm gonna take myself off this. My power didn't go out. I think I knocked the thing out with my foot. I don't know why I keep doing that tonight.
So yeah, anyway, like she goes into the neighbor's house. She sees the shot of the bloody feet, and then she walks in. And then she just sees like Crow, Gull, just like trying to get their way into the house. You see a busted up window. Yeah, there it is.
Yeah, I have too many chords. Is what it is. I need to figure out a more. Better way to do this.
Untangled way to do it. I've been there.
Yeah. So it's this, and then he zooms I think I'm gonna download this and then edit it. So those parts.
This is so meme culture, by the way.
No, I'm 100% gonna download this episode, then edit it, and then put it back up. But it's this. So there's this, and then going further into it. So it's like this two shot that exists. It's this two shot that exists to show you like just her like in the same way that kind of when Tippi Hedren is running, and then it kind of jumps from her to the thing, like in kind of the same way. Hitchcock is building up the suspense by showing you what she's seeing, and then what actually exists, and then what she's seeing again. So I don't know. I think it's honestly a pretty incredible representation of what Hitchcock was trying to do with this. Also terrifying because throughout this movie it hasn't really been violent to that level, and then you see a dude with his eyes fucking pecked out.
Well, two things on this. One, both are aesthetically, but the first one is the brutality that Hitchcock is adding to the bird's qualities in these frames alone, because this to me shows that it's not just some like random birds are attacking. Birds are taking some sort of revenge, have some sort of plot, because they not only killed this man enough to knock him out of his bed at night, but then plucked his eyes out, which also comes with the religious symbolism. If you talk about like Jesus getting on the cross with the two criminals, and the one criminal
he purposely baptized you, but you don't have to bring him into everything.
but it's significant enough. It's significant enough.
Oedipus was blinded. Oedipus became blind because he had sex with his mother. So
but quite literally in the Bible, the one criminal who did not repent for his sins at the end of his life, his eyes were plucked out by crows. So I mean, I think that it is so much like Hitchcock is showing you right there the brutality of these birds, and that their intent is to cause pain, not just some random we're going after humans because of whatever. The other thing here aesthetically, and I talked about it a little bit earlier, was just this is Hitchcock playing with editing in the ways that Russian editing played with the human psyche. When you go through trauma, it's not all at once. It's not everything slows down and you say some words and you put things together. It's very boom, boom, boom. It's very like, oh, you realize this is what's happening. You see this is what happened. You come to reality and realize that the rest of your life, or the rest of whatever the situation is not going to be the same because of what happened.
And your own humanity reacts in the same way that she seems to react when when she's attacked. Like, your first impulse when it comes to trauma is to fight through it. Like, you're not thinking about your own mental state in that sense. So, like, the same way that she was kind of fighting the birds until she couldn't anymore, you wake up later and you're still kind of metaphorically fighting the birds, but that's not your first impulse.
And it's very clear, this is after the scenes where they figured out it wasn't just random. It's after 3 times, and there's clearly something wrong with the birds, that this is very deliberately,
really
the birds are coming to revenge.
With the birds. They're hitting the windmills. You ever seen a windmill? I can't see a windmill now without thinking of the trope. Windmills are very bad for birds. I wanted to bring this in as the last kind of thing that we talk about, which is this headline is sensational as fuck, which it should be, but like it's kind of funny, on the other side of it. Seabird invasion hits coastal homes, which is the story that this is based on. And at the time, there was no explanation for why that had happened, which kind of is what obviously Hitchcock is playing on. Because he had called the newspaper, I guess. He lived near Santa Cruz where this has happened, and it's referenced in the movie that this had happened before in Santa Cruz. So he's kind of imagining what would happen if this happened in a town like near Santa Cruz, but not there. You know what I mean? So, and 2 years later, I guess technically. So he's like envisioning another bird attack after this bird attack has already happened, and they're like, oh wait, this happened in a town nearby like not too long ago. But there was no answer for it at the time. I guess there is now. And the answer is honestly pretty fucking incredible. Not anything that I would have expected. There a toxin producing algae, I guess, had like seagulls. There's a weird name for them in the specific kind of bird. It's like I guess, hold on. I think it's like a shandy or something like that. But so this they had eaten this algae, and it was like an algae that usually infects crabs. Not that kind of crabs. Get your fucking mind out of the gutter, Gianni. Jesus fucking Christ. But no, so yeah, so it was like
Hey, I ain't saying nothing.
hey, crabs. So yeah, which I really hate that this is the name for it, but it's pseudo Nietzschea, spelled a lot like Nietzsche, which is just too on the nose. But like this is the actual story of what happened. It's literally spelled kind of like, I mean, it doesn't have the E, but it's spelled like Nietzschea. Like it's yeah. So they managed in 2012 to test the water, and discover that the water that they had taken to samples at the time contained a toxin which had infected these birds' minds. And I guess in the real story of it, the birds were like throwing up. So they had not only landed on people and like freaked out, and they were kind of just freaking out, pecking stuff, but also they were throwing up, regurgitating. The thing in every single quote is regurgitating anchovies, which is fucking disgusting because that was the first time I ever remember throwing up was anchovies. So, right in the feels. But so they had taken samples, and in 2012 they discovered that the thing that Hitchcock's birds, in this sense, were infected with was this toxin that had kind of not only poisoned them, but I guess as it buries into your brain, had caused them to be incredibly aggressive and just because obviously birds don't know what the fuck is going on when that happens, as humans probably wouldn't if we were all infected with some weird toxin and they start freaking out. And as the birds freaked out, they had done things like peck their way through windows, like similar stuff to what had happened in the birds, honestly. So it's interesting that at the time, though, for decades after that, nobody knew what the fuck what was going on. And that's because the cops seemed too cavalier about coastal invasion because Biden hadn't passed the 1994 crime bill yet, which which gave them overriding powers to just militarize. So I don't think it's too cavalier. I blame Joe Biden. But yeah,
Biden, birds, they both start with a B. So
yeah. Wait, you're blaming Mr. Burns? Oh, birds. Biden, Mr. Burns. No, I have a theory that all bad policy choices over the last, I guess, 50 years, because he was elected in 1973, so it's close to 50 years. All bad policy in the last 40 years somehow. I think Biden has an incredibly bipolar streak where there are times he opposed the Vietnam War as like a more state as a state senator, and then had been elected fully and still opposed. He kind of suffered from Vietnam syndrome, and then in the 90s became like one of the most reactionary foreign policy people available, which is why he got the reputation. Because the more reactionary you are as a foreign policy politician, the more they assume you know about the world.
The more you tend to support war.
Oh yeah. Well, I was gonna say that's a fun sentiment because Alexander Coburn was talking about, and I don't remember the policy it was, but there's some policy that Biden helped push through that made it easier for people to become bankrupt for credit cards or something like that. I don't quite remember what it was.
Oh no! It was the student loan crisis caused by Biden because
right.
Biden. Delaware is known as a tax haven,
right?
So Biden was like the credit card senator,
right? And
senator,
so
yeah.
And so Alexander Coburn was saying, I forget which interview it was in, but he was like, yeah, what everybody should do is take their credit card bills, put it on a truck, and send it to Joe Biden's house so he can pay for it.
I feel like every leftist has like Alexander Coburn and then Hitchens like on either side of it. And it's like, it's someone that's either like resisting it to the point of like, becoming sickly, resisting American imperialism, and then Hitchens being like a fucking neocon.
Yeah, right. And It's always weird because when Hitchens was being all pro Iraq war, at the same time he's like, yeah, listen, I don't trust anything the CIA says. And it's like, well, we are in Iraq because of the information they supposedly gave us. So
Weapons of mass destruction.
right, and so
It's a big problem.
Yeah, it's interesting because
All right, so my working with Ben as long as I did, he's writing like the Hitchens book, like the big Hitchens thing I think for me is something that I've been thinking about a lot lately, which is like new atheist brain. So the problem that I think that Hitchens had wasn't that he trusted any institution. It was that, after the Twin Towers had gotten hit, and like he kind of talked about this at length in different, like Hitchens had gone from kind of being somewhat Marxist, like like a Trotskyist leftist author that was kind of a dissident, to being like, oh well, religion is to blame. So I mean, and this kind of ties into the Birds too, because it's like when religion obviously fails in that sense. Not that Hitchens was ever religious; he was always an atheist. But when it's seen that the main cause of something, as it is in I guess like the State Department version of jihad, like what I mean, like taking the geopolitics and taking the different sectarian problems out of the conflict, and just saying, listen, there are Muslims that are trying to bomb, like what I mean, like, so just making it into a religious conflict is incredibly simple. And in that mind, like, oh well, Muslims now want to bomb, the U.S.
Right.
So what happens?
It's fun that you say new atheist brain because, and I am evoking Gore Vidal once again, but Hitchens wrote that article on Gore Vidal, Vidal Loco, which is a horrible title for essay. Anyway, but he was talking about how why would a talent such as Vidal spend his time around in the gutters of paranoid people and conspiracy theorists? And it's like, well, it's like, Hitchens, you ended up in the gutter there too, so you're not.
Hitchens ended up in worse than the fucking gutter. Like, like neoconservatism. Like, I mean, I guess I'm looking at it. Well, no, I mean, we've lived through like having the first kind of real neocon president, like in Bush, like I mean, like a fully neocon administration, which I don't think Bush ever was. Like, his dad was the head of the CIA, but lots of people in his administration are obviously neocons, which is why they're coming back to the Democratic Party now. Like, it's kind of insane in the way that, like, that was never going to be a good idea. Like, neoconservatism was never going to be a fucking good idea. In the same way that, like, as much as, I mean, I enjoyed interviewing him, like, the whole Glenn Greenwald, like, reactionary thing isn't going to be a good idea.
Yes.
Those things are not going to age well because, like, I don't know, like, we kind of progress. Like, society doesn't revert back to that kind of reactionary globalist policy, which, is fine, but, like, that's not where the world is heading. You can tell that it's not where the world is heading. And to have, a fully neocon administration, to have someone like Hitchens just fully buy into that, makes sense only in the context of suddenly realizing religion is bad, which I think that a lot of new atheists have new atheist brain. Like, Sam Harris is a perfect example. Someone that the only way that you can understand why they have such a reactionary and racist foreign policy suggestion is because the only way that they can understand our turn towards terrorism and the Middle East as a site of conflict. The only way they can understand that is, oh, well, religion is bad and we need to get rid of religion. And but then it's like, all right, I agree with that in the sense of, like, I'm an atheist. Like, I don't think that religion is, I think religion has been I think there are times religion has been positive, but I think overwhelmingly religion has been used as a negative wedge to, like, to drive for the last, I mean, like, 1,000 years, some of the most reactionary policies and some of the most regressive policies. But saying, oh, well, the way that we deal with that is by, like, bombing people in different countries with certain religions is the most, it's not going to happen. They're ideas that someone has in their head.
So,
you're not gonna...
yeah, well, I was going to say, so I mess with a lot of atheists I know, because I'm an atheist who really doesn't care for a lot of atheists because they are
that's 100% what I am
and
too.
I mess with them and I call them godless Christians. They're the people who like to go out there and say, I can be a good Christian with all these Christian virtues, but I don't need God. They're the people, they
haven't escaped from a Christian framework.
Yeah,
how I feel about new atheism itself is kind of a cult and a religion. Like,
yes,
it's the religion of atheism.
They're the people who pack their knapsack with ketchup and ice cream and tell their parents that they don't need them. And so it's an interesting thing that they would resort to the military, because in a sense, first off, like, I don't believe, I'm an atheist too. I don't think the metaphysical claims to truth that Christianity has are true. I think they're false. And
I would probably call myself agnostic more than I would say atheist, in the sense of I don't really believe that there's absolutes. But yeah, no,
I have a problem with having opinionated opinions, and so I would say I'm an atheist. I'm pretty sold on that. But I do understand Christianity in the sense of a cultural phenomenon. And I think when you look at them resorting to the military, it's similar to when the Christians resorted to the Crusades, when they ran into
quite I guess in the Bush administration, at least, quite overtly. Like,
yes, right. It was a holy war, and for us, the difference is our notion of what's sacred and what's holy is now it's in secular garb. It's patriotism. It used to be, if you were a good patriot, it's because you're a good Christian. Now it's more, if it has less of a religious root, although it's not entirely gone. But being a good patriot is, what everybody refers to. The people with Trump, they're like, "Oh, we're good patriots," and it's like,
and that's why we had to rush into the White House. And
yes, right.
Try to overturn election results.
Right. So
we're such patriots that we don't think that our opinion can't be disproved by democracy.
Right. Exactly. And and since all that democracy jazz, as it was brought up in the movie, I hope democracy jazz is not as bad as actual jazz. I'm channeling my inner Adorno here.
How the fuck are you like as attuned to postmodernism as you are, and yet don't like jazz?
I feel
like
I'm mostly joking, because I'm pretty sure that Seth is watching this, and he and I will have words later. But
I had a family that had a house in East Hampton where Jackson Pollock hit the tree. So I passed by there, and I was like, "Oh, Jackson Pollock's last splatter painting."
I feel like
there's the connection of jazz kind of being like a musical version of that kind of almost absurdist artistic expression.
Yeah. I have
funded
a lot
by
of
the CIA, as was jazz.
I have a lot of weird. Well, I guess we should not say weird. Nuanced opinions, because I'm an existentialist who hates absurdists. Every time somebody brings up Camus, I reach for my gun, as the saying goes. I hate it, because Camus he didn't mean it this way, but he's used in a very reactionary manner to maintain things as they are. You're supposed to imagine you're happy rather than go do it.
Exactly.
Anyway, yeah.
Well, the thing about kind of a like almost absurdist level of abstraction in art and in culture in general is during the Cold War it had taken off, because kind of we were trying to prove to the USSR that, like, oh, look at all the cool things you could do in America. And part of that was CIA fund, which, if you really like, I've been on the CIA binge so much. Like, I've been on a CIA, they recruited me. No, I've been on a CIA, so I've been reading so much, like so many books on how the CIA kind of had gotten into all of these different covert expressions of their thing, like including the last book that I read. Kind of, I feel like they get more and more specific. So it's like, oh, like the CIA had killed obviously a lot of world leaders, which is obviously something that has been confirmed over and over again. But then it's like, oh, the CIA probably killed JFK, which is something that is worth exploring, I think. But then the last book I read is JFK versus Alan Dulles, Indonesia, which is very specifically the CIA killed JFK because of his Indonesian policy, which I think is an interesting thesis. I don't necessarily think that that's the right thesis, but like I like the proof that they had given is
right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, again, one more time evoking the name of the dead Gore Vidal. He was some part in the Kennedy administration, not as an administrator, but just somebody who came to the White House and partied.
I'm never
And-
gonna live down during Walker saying, "With all due respect to Kissinger."
Yeah, but Vidal believed that it was the mafia who killed Kennedy, and I don't know how that theory holds because I actually don't know. I don't have an opinion. But he thinks that the mafia killed him because they used mafia connections to make sure that they won certain states, certain areas, and then
I mean, the thing about the mafia in connection to Kennedy is that, and this is proven during their response to Castro and Cuba, they had recruited people in the mafia to try to assassinate Castro, which makes sense because, you know, Batista was incredibly mafia connected. The mafia was using Cuba at that point to kind of create like a very Las Vegas situation, but you know, but even more so because there's like, you know, the laws, if someone's in charge of a country, like the laws are going to be incredibly favorable to whoever's giving them a shitload of money, which is where Godfather 2, which my favorite fucking Godfather movie, honestly, you know, is kind of playing with that throughout it. I mean, Coppola's a fucking genius, but you know, the connections that the mafia
Hell
had
yes.
with the Batista regime, and you know, it is proven that they did reach out, like you know, the testimony from the actual people they reached out to later during the church committee. The mafia was recruited in order to assassinate Castro at various points.
Operation Mongoose.
Yeah. So the theory is that those people were still kind of on their payroll, which they were, and that the mafia had been recruited to kill Kennedy. I don't necessarily believe that part of it,
right?
But that is kind of that's where the mafia connection comes.
Well, yeah, Vidal said that he thought that Kennedy's father was trying to play two sides, where he was using the mafia, but then he let Bobby Kennedy go after organized crime.
Yeah.
And his only excuse to Gianni, I think is who he was talking to, was he said, "Well, my sons are dragon slayers." And so Gianni's like, it's whatever.
Well, Kennedy's father had also kind of, you know, he was the head of the fucking under Roosevelt. He was the one that was watching like the stock exchange. So like, you know, it's not necessarily, you know, Kennedy had like the Sinatra connections to the mafia, which is true, but you know.
Oh yeah, right. Yeah.
You know, Jay Hodges was killing it with his comments because number one, he's the only one commenting anyway. But this is, you know, nice place you got here, Castro. Doesn't Castro have a nice place here? Then it should be a shame if something happens to all the
but to bring this back to the
Wait, I have to announce something. I don't know if I'm allowed to announce yet, but
go ahead.
So starting on September 1st, I'm going to be hosting This Is Revolution. You know, once a month.
I've been on there once.
So well, I went down there for the Oscars, which is funny, because Karthik and I were on there, and that was like our brainchild that we were coming up with for months was how can we incorporate the Oscars into like a leftist critique of Hollywood. So
can I interject?
But what I was thinking of, you know, I'm going to be, I think, simultaneously streaming between once a month between this channel at the same time as streaming from This Is Revolution. You know, like the same stream. And the first, I think I have to talk to Jason Foley about this, but the first movie that we're going to do is Oliver Stone's JFK, because I'm going to have Gene recruit some, like, and me too, but we're going to have historians come on I want to have historians scream at each other over Oliver Stone's JFK, which I think would be fucking hilarious. So I have this plan to do that. Originally, I was going to do that on this channel as like, you know, like kind of like almost like a season finale thing. But I think I'm gonna do it on that channel because it's so much more fucking based when it's This Is Revolution.
It's a nerd fight.
So
John,
Jason's not leaving This Is Revolution.
Huh?
I said, to be clear, Jason's not leaving This Is Revolution.
I didn't say I'm gonna be hosting this. I've said this once a month. I'm gonna be co-hosting.
Ah, okay.
Once we're doing a movie show, like once a month, we're gonna be doing a This Is Revolution movie stream, and I don't know, it's gonna be fun, but. So we're gonna recruit historians to yell at each other over that. Yeah. Anyway, everyone else can go. I don't know. If no one else has anything to say, I'll I don't know. Final thoughts, I guess.
Yeah. Being my first Hitchcock movie in my lifetime, although I have heard of him, I have to say I have a pretty good positive review, so I would say like maybe a 9 out of 10, maybe 9.5 out of 10. I really kind of wish there was more like, as I was kind of getting into the movie, I was like, I'm just pretty sure there's going to be a bird attack. Because like even there were some scenes like when she's actually giving the lovebirds to Mr. Daniels, I think is what his name, or Mr. Bennett rather. I'm thinking as he's looking through his binoculars as she's getting attacked by the gull in the forehead.
I thought the CIA had gotten you, by the way. I thought the CIA had taken you out.
Oh, what? No.
I'm glad you're okay.
Yeah, no, just had to stop my cats from knocking over something.
Yeah, CIA cat intelligence.
yeah, cat drones. I can't believe in birds or cats now.
So yeah, basically I was saying like I was just so hoping as he was looking through his binoculars he was going to see another swarm of birds, and it just didn't really happen. I was thinking, being a horror movie, you kind of like you see a lot of that stuff happening, and that's also typical.
That's 21st century brain getting to you because even late because this isn't necessarily considered like late 20th century filmmaking. Like the 60s is its own thing. It's right after like the new cinema started. New Hollywood wasn't making sequels. So they weren't thinking of sequels in mind, which when we were watching Planet of the Apes was really the first. Planet of the Apes was the first movie that they had kind of, in 1968, kind of turned into like a franchise. So this was pre franchise. If you made a movie, they weren't necessarily thinking about like how can we continue to monetize this. It was like like this movie is a solo work of the only thing that they were really making sequels of is like B movies where they could do it for
like nothing. The last point I was going to make about like a horror movie, typical, like you leave kind of an open ending. Like we don't know what happened to Melanie. Did they go to the hospital? Did she survive? Did she not? Because she was basically traumatized by the birds attacking her in the attic.
And I think this is one of the few movies that they could. This is one of the first movies that they could have left an open ending because the Hays Code had only been abolished 3 years before that. So under the Hays Code, you couldn't leave an open ending. The ending would have been evil is punished, and under like penalty of like your film being defunded, the only ending you really could have was evil is punished. In this sense, in this movie, evil is whatever the fuck you transcribe on it. Like evil doesn't necessarily exist in the sense of like they're good and this is evil. Evil in the sense is human beings are being traumatized by something, which is the same thing kind of in something like War of the Worlds, where birds are the cure for the evil. We aren't necessarily given like a good a good understanding of why aliens have chosen to swarm us. Or taking all of our swarmas from from halal restaurants. That's something that I just pronounced it weird, but aliens informed us, and you don't really given you're not really given an explanation of why that is, but you know how it ends and you know why it's been stopped. In this, you don't know how it ends and you don't know if it's been stopped. So it's kind of the open ending that something.
And that was kind of like my obsession, though. It's like, how is this going to end? Like as I was watching the movie, I was like, God, I really want to see what happens, And like the other thing I found out, like Hitchcock did not want to put the end on the end of the picture. I didn't actually. I just learned that today as I was finishing the movie. He what's the phrase I'm looking for? He did basically after studio intervention said, hey, you need to put at the end to make it like a final.
But what movie now has at the end? No movie has at the end.
No, that's like
it's a conceptual thing that existed in early cinema, like to tell the audience that the movie was over because like you had to understand that. And I think that goes honestly back to the same Hays Code thing. Like it had to be a morality tale. This is not a morality tale. This is an open-ended, whatever the fuck you want to transcribe onto a tale, and you kind of have to. There's a straightforward reading. The straightforward reading is birds are upset that we fucking killed them, and you saw that in the trailer. You know what I mean? And that's why the trailer and Hitchcock's trailers in general are so amazing, is because he kind of gives you this weird like a very straightforward read, like, oh, like, look, there's birds on hats, there's birds here. But you watch the movie, that's not necessary. I mean, that is an interpretation, but like, there's a bunch of other interpretations you can take from it, I think.
Again, nature. This is another thing of when nature attacks back.
Yeah, I mean,
we're eating a lot of crows, so crows eating us.
I think that's the most base. I think that's the most I think that's the most simple explanation of the movie that you can, like, you know what I mean? Like, that's like, if you were gonna straightforwardly read the story, it would be we attack nature, nature attacks us. I think leaving it open ended kind of opens it up for whatever interpretation you want, which kind of creates some really fantastic possibilities. Because if that's not the interpretation, like, you know, why is it happening? Which is historically, if you're looking into the bird attack that he's kind of referencing,
mm-hmm.
You know.
Yeah, it's just one of my Marxian speaks. So I've been
that's not Marxian, but yeah, that's more like early 20th century, like, you know, like, we need to stop fucking nature up or they're gonna fuck us up back. Like it was in poetry, that was the theme a lot, I think. I mean, Karthik can kind of.
You're thinking of the Romantics, I think.
Yeah. A Marxian reading is an oppressed class of birds that are in gilded cages have decided that they're going to rise up against their oppressors, and because, you know, humans and birds are on a different class level, then it's kind of a class analysis of humans versus birds, which isn't necessarily something that I take either, because kind of Hitchcock is kind of playing with the idea of like kind of a new class analysis, like the nuevo rich and the older rich, and kind of putting everything into these categories where he's playing with the dynamics of it. So I don't necessarily go for a fully class reading of oppressed birds versus humans. I think it's really open up to interpretation, which kind of makes it incredible.
I've been reading a lot of Marx lately, so that's kind of where I got it from. But I'll give somebody else a chance so we can wrap up here, because we're almost at our.
No, we're an hour past it, but it's all right. All right, Karthik.
So I forgot the name of this author, but you can remind me, who wrote Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy? He died recently. He's a spy novel author, John le Carre, right? Yeah. John le Carre apparently once met Stanley Kubrick. I think I saw somebody share it on Twitter to talk about a movie that Stanley Kubrick was pitching him to write a screenplay, and like basically Kubrick was describing some kind of like late stage like feudalist society where people's lives have become so meaningless that they have become indulgent enough that they, like, don't even want to have any that they kind of engage in these like orgies to feel a little better about themselves, etc. And like Kubrick turns to him and asks, like, where would you set a story like this? And I think John le Carre suggests something like 19th century Austria or Vienna or something like that. And then Kubrick turns around and says, we're going to set it in New York City. And this was apparently the pitch for Eyes Wide Shut. So
the second you said New York City, yeah.
Yeah, and like kind of a similar way I felt like,
folks. No Epstein, no islands.
Like I kind of felt like this was similarly a kind of late stage capitalism allegory more than anything else. And the fact that
it was pre-late stage capitalism, really. I mean, late stage capitalism kind of is the more PC way of calling neoliberalism, which wasn't was over a decade later.
Maybe
I'm challenging everybody on this panel today.
In a way though, like they were kind of preempting. I mean, Hitchcock is kind of like preempting it by showcasing the woman go-getter in the role that she is, etc. But also in a kind of way like subverting that as well by showing eventually a different, more complex kind of class analysis that you mentioned. But at the end of the day, I can't help but like think of the specific nature of the choice of like this idyllic like suburban seeming or like whatever like idyllic town where everything should be boring and mundane, but so much so that like the only exciting thing like the only exciting thing that can happen to them is to get under attack. Like that's the most eventful that their lives can get, and like Hitchcock is more than happy to provide that and also present it as a sort of morality tale also, because like it is like the birds can be seen as the good side, as we kind of discussed many times. And I think like I don't know if that like could pass the Hays Code. Like, can you actually present the birds as a moralistic do-gooder tale where the birds are actually correcting for an error or something?
I think that's why animal attack horror really started with this film, is because you really couldn't present the animals attacking us as you did in this, and then 5 years later with Planet of the Apes, Jaws, like, well, not Jaws necessarily, but this animal attack genre where it's not necessarily that we defeat the natural force coming after us. You know what I mean? Like the natural force coming after us at that point is kind of which is interesting that they base it in reality, like base it in actual things that have happened, because the natural force at that time, it's, you can't really judge it by a good versus evil thing. So I think that's why that we hadn't really had this kind of animal attack horror until The Birds, which really the movie that completely stabbed the Hays Code, gave it its final little, was Psycho. Psycho and also Breathless, but like that kind of combined a force of two movies that didn't necessarily play with. I mean, Breathless was happening in France, so obviously it didn't have to, but the mainstream success that it had garnered at that time in 1960, kind of that was the final nail in the coffin, as they say, of the Hays Code, where it kind of was these moralistic tales. I think that it continued on because you see something like Bonnie and Clyde, and like they die at the end of it, but still, you're left with this kind of solidaristic feeling, which is exactly what the Hays Code was trying to prevent in these cases. So yeah, I think that I don't necessarily think that it's you don't have to do a straightforward naturalistic reading of it, and I don't think necessarily it has to be kind of a class analysis. It is interesting that there does seem to be a new class analysis, because there is like the playing of like New Rich. It feels like almost like a Citizen Kane style, like that kind of like newspaper magnet style Rich. The next generation after that versus like an old style, like as you really kind of get when you hear the first guy's accent, like a New England Wasp style old Rich. So it's interesting that they're kind of playing with this, but at the same time, I think it's interesting that it's played off as these different dynamics, expecting that something's going to come from these dynamics, which it doesn't. The only thing that really comes from this dynamics is that they blame her as an outsider for causing these problems briefly, but then even then, like, you think like something's going to happen to her, it doesn't. Like, everyone kind of leaves the town, like like it's all these things are kind of built in these in the sense of these relationships that don't necessarily they don't amount to anything at all, really. I don't know. I'm gonna give Gianni the next chance to give concluding thoughts.
All right. Just again, I appreciate having me on the panel. I love talking about movies, and I need to do it more often.
Loves birds, folks. Loves the birds.
What's crazy is I actually do love birds too. Like in my apartment, I actually have like this little like inlet where like there's like family of pigeons live, and they like hatch eggs every like few weeks, and I watch the babies grow.
Keep them in a gilded cage.
Yeah, I keep them in the cage. Yeah.
By the way, we didn't really mention the wordplay where he says, as with Melanie Daniels as like a Paris Hilton style socialite, but also prankster, kind of being like, oh, her gilded cage is, and she's stuck in this world of and she's broke the luggage. There's no accountability for it. So I thought, I don't know, I wrote that down to bring up and didn't, but keeps them in a cage, folks.
But like I said earlier, I'm not a big Hitchcock fan, but The Birds is my favorite film of his. And watching it again,
I like Frenzy. I think Frenzy's my favorite Hitchcock film.
I need to watch Wrong Man, because that is more of a working class Hitchcockian film, and I haven't seen it yet.
By the way, before the end of the month, you want to come back on for an episode on the waterfront?
Oh my God. Yeah, let's actually let's off camera. We'll talk about that on the waterfront side.
I 100% want to do that, and I don't know why the fuck I haven't.
I would talk more aesthetically on the waterfront though, more than meeting. But
I'd talk aesthetically, and then I'd have some historian Some historian that I picked up that needed work. Oh yeah. All right. Well, here's a perfect J Hutch comment for you.
You should get the granddaughter, right? Isn't she a filmmaker and actor and all that?
I'm not too sure. But yeah,
She lives on the waterfront.
I promise you, my my obsession with birds is not related to Dolce Vita.
You know, I'm taking over to screenshot this and find a perfect.
Please do, please.
Gianni was one time married to a giant bird.
I'm actually fucking Big Bird. You know, I didn't want to. I didn't want to like say it. But,
New York City, right?
yeah, exactly. Sesame Street's on the road.
Put the emphasis on. Can you tell me how to get to Sesame Street? There you go.
Can you tell me how to get? Can you tell me how to get there?
But watching this film several times and really looking deep into it really gave like a new appreciation for how not only how Hitchcock did films, but how you can really a good film you can dissect several ways, and I think that's helped me realize like even in this short week, like if I were to go back and watch some of these films that I have on my wall, like how many of them could I really deep down and find so many different meanings to? How many could I find connections to? How many make timeless connections? You know, obviously Hitchcock wasn't thinking about COVID-19 when he made The Birds, but I could still find connections in his film because he made a good film that is timeless.
Well, I mean, that's kind of what I connect you so hard about Scorsese, and you know, similar directors that we've had more recently. I mean, you know, right now I don't think we have someone that really does what Scorsese did, but like it's this connection to film itself and this conversation that as someone making like as a director, you're having a conversation, which is something that I think really came up during this 1960s period, and I could bring Charlie in on this because I think it's a very it's an incredibly postmodern. It's a very postmodern reading of how to direct film. But there's an incredibly postmodernist reading where a director should be in conversation with everything that's come before him. And I don't necessarily think that, I mean, if you watch anything from the 1940s and 50s, it's not doing that. It's never doing that. Sometimes they're in conversation with, as Kiss Me Deadly, which is the first episode that we did on the show, they're in conversation with the novelization of something, which is something that, directors like Verhoeven have done since then, where you're kind of, you're rebelling against the source material you're using for a film, which I honestly love every movie that's done that I've watched. Like Kiss Me Deadly is one, but also Starship Troopers is another one that did that. Like it is literally rebelling against fascist nature, like the fascist nature of a book, because in a book you can kind of get away with being a literal fascist in the early 20th century, because like that wasn't really looked down upon quite as much at that time. So, but like starting with Hitchcock, but really going into a lot of these new Hollywood directors, they're in conversation with the elements of Hollywood itself. And they're kind of conversing with, in Hitchcock's sense, it's amazing because he's conversing with himself. He's literally having a dialogue with himself and everything else that he's created, and saying, guess what? Like, guess what? Like, early Hitchcock, fuck you. New Hitchcock, fuck you. I'm going to make a movie that literally has subverted my own collection of films, which is kind of an amazing thing. But it's
Spielberg, F you.
Which is incredible. Even to add to that, which is not part of my final analysis, but even that, like you still see that today, and it still can be done today. I think that Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is a great example of Tarantino doing that to Tarantino.
Well, I mean, I think that's also Tarantino in conversation with New Hollywood, which is a very interesting thing because I think it's an idealized thought in his head. It's kind of funny that after that, Tarantino wrote a novel, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Like, this is what I
wanted to say.
Yeah, no, but like, I don't know. Tarantino is a bit heavy-handed. We watched Walker, not this Tuesday, last Tuesday before that, and the movie that kind of went along with Walker was Straight to Hell. Like, Alex Cox filmed that movie to finance Walker, and they're kind of dressed exactly like Pulp Fiction 6 years before that. Like, it's clearly something that obviously Tarantino hasn't, didn't like, copy that style, but like clearly was aesthetically inspired by Alex Cox, which makes sense because, it's this, he also, Alex Cox doesn't want to be on this show, so it makes me sad because I actually had a nice email exchange with him. But no, but big Alex Cox fans here. No, so kind of, but you can tell that Tarantino's taking inspiration from this punk rock style of filmmaking that kind of hadn't existed before, low budget, barely scripted, which Tarantino, of course, is kind of creating a heavily scripted version of that in Pulp Fiction almost. Like, I think Alex Cox's like California in that film, like the concept of that is very similar to Tarantino's conception of things. Of course, then Tarantino's conversing with himself. But I think that Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is kind of Tarantino deflecting himself on kind of almost like a golden calf. Like the thought that, he's been watching movies since he was a kid, and he's just so obsessed with this like image of like new Hollywood, like the Roman Polanski, which, everybody in that time period is proven to be literally golden calves. Like Roman Polanski is literally like had that little bit of sympathy, and then it was proved to have fucked a 13-year-old. Like, you know what I mean? Like everyone in that time period is tarnished, and Tarantino plays with that in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Like, you're left kind of, I mean, number one, you're kind of expecting that murder is going to take place. It doesn't. If that murder doesn't take place, Roman Polanski's 13-year-old fucking would probably have come out a lot sooner. There would be no, everybody not knowing that almost happened, even in that sense, probably would have brought down Polanski a lot sooner. I think.
Or probably wouldn't have happened at all, honestly.
Maybe. I don't know. I think if you're into that.
But just to quickly wrap up on the Birds, I really appreciated looking at it again and looking at it through different lenses, and finding different interpretations. And like Hitchcock has an interesting connection with feminism or anti-feminism, depending on who you're reading from, and trying to dissect
depending
that.
Depending on which Hitchcock shows up to work.
Well, but even an analysis of his work, people debate about it all the time, whether his films are feminist or not. And trying to look at it through that lens and finding the connections was something very.
I would go with your interpretation of this movie is. I mean, I think this movie is an early feminist work.
I think that part of it is me as a 2021 viewer of this film finding the connection, but at the same time, like knowing Hitchcock, knowing what he does, he just loves to stir the pot. And it's definitely, to me, trying to think about what his vision was is definitely more of I'm curious about the human psyche. Like if something random happens, what do we do? Who do we blame? Do we
but I also think that you're kind of, I mean, all right, so I think that you're right that we're kind of watching this like, I think Karthik made this point too, that you're watching this dynamic kind of play out between this, between Melanie Daniels as like her generation of, I mean, literally a socialite. So I don't think any working class woman would necessarily be given the freedom to fucking jump in a Roman, in a Roman fountain. But like, you're kind of given this, you're given this, yeah, so it kind of is in concert with itself because, the mother Lydia is lonely, and her marriage ended, and it's all these different like things kind of playing out at once that she's kind of kept. She kind of is in a cage too. Like she's kept in this house. She is afraid of being abandoned. She doesn't want to leave. Like you're watching her obligations, I guess, as a spouse, kind of play out in that sense. Her husband's died, and there's no purpose left. Her only purpose is raising her kids, which makes it interesting that she has an 11-year-old kid because she's still kind of raising a kid. What would have happened if she didn't have an 11-year-old kid and her kids were both adults? Like, and she can't connect with her kids either. She can't on that level. Like she says that her husband connected with the kids and she doesn't. Like,
right.
So, Charlie, you got concluding thoughts?
I need a cigar so I look like a villain. With my cat.
With two cats, I don't think you look like a villain. With two cats, you look overwhelmed. With one cat,
there's a third cat back there that you can't see.
The cats look like a villain in that.
Well, but my concluding thoughts is, since we're all throwing out directors who are not Hitchcock that we like, Mine
All right,
is
playing the game. Directors that are not Hitchcock, and go.
Werner Herzog is my favorite director. And he has this interesting concept of an ecstatic truth. And the only reason I was going to bring that up is you were talking about the dialogue in postmodern films.
You're into little people in armor, aren't you? That's what you're, just running around film sets that are made to look like medieval Germany.
Well, no comment. No, I'm kidding. No, but no, but what I was thinking of though is you're talking about how postmodern films are kind of a conversation with the audience through various different mediums, various different ideas, objects, etc.
Mm-hmm.
The interesting thing is I think that we have started to see an evolution away from that. Now, and I say start to, and I can't emphasize that enough, start to. Because the main person I see it in is Werner Herzog and his notion of ecstatic truth. Where he will deliberately in films, he will manipulate things to make a point. For example, he has a documentary, Little Dieter Needs to Fly, and if you notice, he took down some picture in the guy's house and he put he told the actor, or not the actor, the person, to open and shut doors a bunch. And he said that was the guy's, some hang up he has. And it turns out that's not true. That guy doesn't actually open and shut doors like that. But it was to make a point, because if you go in the guy's house, he has a whole bunch of pictures of doors that are open, and it reveals a fear because he was a POW in Vietnam and he was locked in cages a lot, that he has a kind of a very subtle obsession with leaving doors open. But it may be just not exact. But anyway, so it's I just wanted to add that to your talk.
Well,
about
so I would say another Herzog point is so I think that when you look at The Birds, and I think that when you look at Jaws, they're all kind of based on real stories, but like incredibly embellished, like almost fisherman tales of stories. When he makes Grizzly Man, he literally makes a documentary about, like, kind of he's doing what these animal attack movies are afraid to do, afraid to tell the actual straightforward story of one of these attacks. So it's interesting that, like, the Timothy Treadwell version of that in Grizzly Man is like, he's making a documentary, because you don't all, like, whether you look at Jaws, which is a real story of shark attacks in Cape Cod, or you look at The Birds, a real story of bird attacks in Santa Cruz, there are these fantastical allegorical versions of it. When you look at Grizzly Man, you can't really make an allegorical. It's literally just like a guy goes into nature and says, "Guess what, nature? I got dominion over you." And then nature says, "No, you have dinner."
Right. And like, and it's also used because, like, for example, the scene where I think it's somebody who's related to the Grizzly Man. I forget who it is. I honestly forget. But she was given his watch or his effects or whatever, which was a scene that was set up. It was not, kind of a natural aspect of everything going on. But what I found interesting with that is
also him looking. He's clearly listening to the attack happen, and he's like, "Oh, you can't." Which he doesn't have the power to do that. He doesn't have the power to be like, "Oh, you can't listen to your family member get dismembered."
Right.
You can't be like, "Oh, I don't feel comfortable doing that." Like,
but it's interesting that the contrast between him, say, and like postmodern filmmakers like Hitchcock is that, like you were saying, Hitchcock bases his movie off real things, but maybe embellishes it a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Herzog is trying to reveal something more real, at least in his words, and so he uses lying as a tool to reveal
as
something.
Germans do.
Yes, he yes.
It's his final solution.
Well,
I
was gonna say my great grandparents had to escape the Nazis, so they do lie. But it's interesting.
Truth tellers, the Nazis. Hitler was basically Jimmy Dore.
Oh, you know. Whenever I've had talks with my friends,
Dig it
Seth
for
about.
us. There you go. There you go. There
I
you
said the
go.
other day, I was like, left podcast should stop starting beef with each other, and then I go and fucking compare Jimmy Dore and Hitler. I'm
Well,
not doing well on my own standards here.
Well, I mean, I was
Is
gonna say
he left though? Is he left?
He's not.
my friend Seth and I have a little arguments about Jimmy Dore from time to time because I don't like him.
I mean,
when
I
Dore
started
is
doing
a
this because
bore.
I started doing this because I was Michael Brooks' editor. I don't.
Yes.
You know, there's,
Right.
like,
No, I
even just
understand.
conceptually, I can't like Jimmy Dore.
Right. Well, and also whenever I think of Jimmy Dore, I think of what evoking a ghost, the ghost again.
Friends of the show, Jimmy Dore and Reagan.
Well, I was going to evoke Gore Vidal, what he said about Al Franken. He said he was a comedian that never told, or never made anybody laugh, a writer who never wrote anything of importance. And
I laughed at Al Franken when I was 10.
Probably not, probably on accident. But you know, when Vidal describes Al Franken that way, that's what I think of Jimmy Dore. I would just add that he's no, that's not nice to say. Fuck it.
Just
I would say fuck it. No, he's just you know, he's a demagogue. And you know what Karl Kraus said about demagogues, they say things in a stupid way to make stupid people think that they're smart too.
And
But
it's also just the invisibility cloak that now apparently can get thrown on people, which is not just one Jimmy Dore uses, where the "I'm a comedian" label, which clearly you're talking to your audience not as a comedian, but like the "I'm a comedian" label kind of gets thrown onto you because someone criticizes your thoughts. You're like, well, I'm just
I'm just joking, man. I'm just making
David Feldman recently had an amazing fucking bit on Majority Report where he came in and he's like, I'm just a comedian. I'm just, I'm a stupid guy. I'm the dumbest guy you've ever, like, you're just going on about, like, every time he was making fun of Jimmy Dore, every time he was just like, listen, I might be the dumbest guy that's ever, like, you know what I mean? Like, just going for
right. Well, I was going to say, everybody talks about pipelines, pipelines leading to fascism or whatever. I think we found a pipeline that leads from, second-rate comedians to demagogues. Maybe all the demagogues we've had in the past were just really bad comedians, Nevertheless, but
there's so many jokes I want to make, but we're like.
Well, I was gonna say I would make more jokes. I'm looking at the time because
we're over our
we're way
all
over.
Right. Well, I guess starting with you, John. You want to plug anything before we go?
Absolutely. So you could find me on Twitch, TGRS. That's TJRS, the John Ross Show. I'm going to kind of be switching it up because I'm going back to school, so I'm going to switch over to doing nights. Haven't really got a time set yet, but I hope to do that in probably about a week. You can read me on Substack, tjrs.substack.com.
Everyone's got a Substack.
Weekly.
Should I get one?
I don't do it like Glenn Greenwald does it, unfortunately. So just trying to distinguish myself. I got to distinguish myself from Glenn Greenwald. And read me there.
Not Glenn Greenwald? I want to ironically say friend of the show, but I've literally interviewed him.
I'm not gonna be at a Greenwald. In fact, I got to take down my initial Glenn Greenwald is a hero of mine blog because till I kind of got the full circle of why he left The Intercept, and now I feel like I've smacked myself.
Oh, he's still. I'm not gonna lie, he's unironically still a hero of mine. I think that what he's.
I just feel like I hit a roadblock with that one too early. Also, I am on all the social medias. Find me there. All right.
Karthik.
Next.
You wanna plug anything?
Yeah, definitely check out Left Flank Vets. We're trying to line up some good interviews with musicians who are doing what we consider to be revolutionary work, which is not just like doing lip service to issues, but actually like working with the community, actually making the music that the industry doesn't want to hear, etc. And like we recently had Napoleon the Legend and Nejma Nefertiti who had
great. Napoleon the Legend is like amazing.
Yeah, and it's so good to through that experience and through talking to Napoleon and like to get a sense of what kind of artists there are who are actually doing this kind of work, because there is no central repository where you can just like find people who are doing revolutionary work the same way there is like a Billboard chart. There isn't like a revolutionary tracks chart, right? So it'd be pretty cool to have like a space where you have a whole other alternative group of musicians who are not like part of some kind of aesthetic counterculture, but like are engaged in some kind of restructuring of the thing itself of music consumption in this society. And like we have a couple of other interviews lined up. We're definitely going to have this artist called the Narcissist, who also calls himself the
That
Iraqafella.
doesn't sound that radical.
Yeah, he also calls himself Iraqafella,
That
and
sounds
he was
more.
one of
That
the
sounds
people
more
who began the whole like hashtag musicians for Palestine. And it was pretty like one of the more vocal supporters of Palestine from the beginning, and like has had collaborations with many international artists. Like he himself is Canadian, and I believe Iraqi Canadian. I'm not 100% sure, but we'll get to talk to him. We've been listening to his music for over a couple of weeks. And then we also have like something coming up with hopefully soon Bamboo, who has like been wanting to appear on Left Flank for a while. So through this process, like maybe more and more radical artists we'll interview. So hopefully the viewers of Movie Night can also tune into Left Flank once in a while.
It kind of feels like you, Left Flank, and This is a Revolution are building up kind of twin platforms, which is really cool because of all the stuff that they've all done at the same time. Like Marcus is on This is a Revolution, regularly. Like it kind of feels like building up that apparatus is something that's really happening, like on an extremely ground level on both of those platforms, and like that's honestly amazing to me. Gianni, anything you want to plug?
Yeah, so please check out Alone on Netflix. I believe it might be also on Discovery Plus. Not Discovery Plus. What is that new one that? What is that? Well, one of the streaming services that are pretty big that came out of maybe Paramount Plus. I am a filmmaker and producer, and all of my work I always share on Instagram. So please, and Twitter. So please follow me. My handle is not right next to my name there. And yeah, Forrest, thank you so much for having me on, dude. I love talking movies.
Yeah,
I'm
I'll bring you
excited to
on.
do this again.
A lot more than whatever. I think it's I feel like I've had people that I've purely met off this whole like podcasting thing that I've been doing, and like I don't know, I have like so many people that are like incredible like IRL friends of mine that I want to have on. I mean, including Izzy, but he had he has a kid, and like I think he kind of had to, he's been kind of exhausted, so kind of hopped off early. But like it's been fun. It's fun to have like people. I almost get more nervous though for having like real life friends on than I do for some podcasting ones. All right.
No, it was a pleasure. Thank you, man.
Yeah. Charlie.
Oh, you're muted.
Yeah, you're muted right now. You gotta.
Damn CIA. If you want eloquent, if you want cynical, snarky, but eloquently phrased essays to read, you can go to my Substack. It's called Ferocia Anime. I am sure it's the only Substack that's got a Latin title.
I wouldn't be so sure about that.
You want to be so sure? Well,
you never heard of
biggestdickest.substack.com? But it's my Substack is called Ferocia Anime. I also sometimes write for the International Magazine as well as the Human Front. So if you want to go follow those pages,
the Human Front obviously being the bird run.
Yes, it's where we make the drones. And I don't know. That's about it for me.
All right. Well, my big plug, I guess. I mean, obviously, watch This Is Revolution because that's an amazing podcast, and I always want to promote that. But our big plug, I guess, is that on Tuesday we're gonna be watching Sid and Nancy, and it's gonna be pretty fucking amazing because we have Jamie Peck coming on, and along with Conan Neutron, C. Derek Barn, like I mean, the stacked panel we usually have, but
And I'll be
having
here.
Jamie Peck on that is gonna be no relation to the Birds. It's gonna be a pretty fucking amazing show. So I definitely want to say that. With that, I guess I will just say left is best.